What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto puts the council in its place? Council bashing. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. On the night of October 10th, a terrible being known as the Kyuubi rampaged through the peaceful village of Konohagakure no Sato. On this night many great shinobi were lost, and on this very night was born the greatest of them all. A chill was all that was felt throughout the village. Everywhere shinobi alike felt the presence of something dark, something ominous. Within seconds an enormous kitsune appeared within the confines of the village, and thus began the mass panic. And so began the destruction. Buildings crumpled under its paws, shinobi fell like flies to its 9 batting ram-like tails. Through it all only one thought ran through the minds of the citizens of Konoha. Where was their Yondaime? At this moment, the professor appeared. The retired Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, stood there looking down upon the kitsune. At 56 years of age, his demeanor had not diminished. Along with his samurai armor, he made for an imposing figure on the battlefield that inspired a fierce loyalty within the Konoha shinobi. This allowed them to regain their focus. Knowing that the man once hailed as the Kami no Shinobi, god of shinobi, would see them through this disaster until their Yondaime returned. Hiruzen was whatever true leader aimed to be, calm on the outside, but in his mind he was processing various strategies with which to take down the beast threatening his home. What happened during the childbirth? With Minato and his wife Bawako present, there should have been no possible incident, thought the Sandaime. We'll have to stall as much as possible and hope that Minato will arrive soon with some answers. This all happened within a split second. The next he was directing his shinobi to combat the titan within the village. Regroup, yelled the Sandaime. Turning to the Junin commander, Nara Shikaku, a man with 3 scars marring his face, he began to issue orders. Get the civilians into their evacuation zones and protect the king. I want none of our future shinobi fighting this beast. Gather your clansmen and begin working on ensnaring that beast. Work with the Akamichi to restrain the beast. I want the Sarutobi and Uchiha clans launching a full ninjutsu offensive on the beast. Instruct the Hyuga to begin evacuations and to protect the civilians at all costs. Bring me Inoichi so I may transmit my orders to the shinobi. We must stall until Minato arrives. Quote, Hi Hokage-sama, replied the normally lazy Nara. Now was not the time for games. As he shunshined away from the area to begin gathering the clans and clan heads, he thought about the king that Sarutobi spoke of. The children and the future shinobi of Konohagakure. They would not be involved in this battle, they must be kept safe and away from the beast. The will of fire must, know it will continue to the next generation. Almost at once Inoichi arrived by the Hokage's side. With the presence of the Yamanaka mind reader, Hokage began distributing his orders as he watched scores of shinobi mindlessly attack the beast. Once the orders were telepathically transmitted to his captains and clan heads, he bit the end of his thumb and began forming the seals of his summoning technique. Kachiyose no Jutsu, summoning technique, shouted the Sandaime. From the smoke emerged Enma, the king of the monkeys, who instantly took note of the situation. It finally happened, said Enma with a sigh. Hi, replied the Sandaime, it is up to us to ensure that the beast does not cause more harm. Let's go, Enma. And with that Enma transformed into an abnormally large adamantium staff, which Hiruzen wielded with more finesse than thought possible for a staff that large. As the clans began to arrive one by one, they began to comply with the Sandaime's orders. A troop of Nara clansmen joined together and launched their clan technique, the Kagemane no Jutsu, shadow binding technique, restraining the Kyuubi and allowing for the Sarutobi and Uchiha clan to begin their assault on the monstrous Biju. Battalions of clansmen began weaving signs for their fire techniques. All at once a blaze so intense it would turn rock into molten lava struck the Kyuubi. At the same moment the Sandaime began his assault, hitting the Kyuubi with his staff in the weaker joint areas, forcing it to the ground as the Akamichi clansmen began to enlarge their bodies through use of the Baika no Jutsu, super multi-sized technique, to restrain the Kyuubi once the fire techniques ended. All at once the Akamichis brought their hands down upon the back, and it seemed that the beast was contained for the moment. What they did not realize was that this only served to anger the Kyuubi even more. With a mighty roar and a flash of chakra, he broke loose of the Nara shadow bind and seared the appendages of the Akamichi that restrained him. Looking upon the platoons of shinobi, a grin appeared on the Kyuubi's face. He delighted in the chaos, the wanton destruction and fear that was wrought by his mere presence. In that moment he titled his head back and let loose a blood-curdling howl as he began gathering what seemed to be a combination of red yuki, demonic chakra, and blue chakra, spiritual and physical energy, in his maw. As the chakra coalesced, it began to grow larger and larger as the combination of demonic chakra and spiritual chakra merged into a purple sphere. A panic spread throughout the ranks of Konoha shinobi. Many took off without warning. The amount of evil chakra and malice permeating the air was enough to kill some of the weaker shinobi. Others just stood in fear and awe as they watched the massive beast clamp his jaws shut over the condensed sphere of energy. With a mighty roar, the Kyuubi launched the sphere towards the stone-faced monument made for the current and previous Hokage, where their faces were carved into the stone. In that moment, a flash of yellow appeared atop the stone face of the Yondaime Hokage. Minato Namikaze, Konoha's Kiroi no Senko, Konoha's Yellow Flash, and fourth Hokage had arrived. At his arrival he instantly began a series of complex seals at lightning-fast speeds. "I will protect this village, even at the cost of my life," shouted the Namikaze as series of black kanji appeared in front of the monument. "Hiraishin Kekai, Flying Thunder God Barrier," shouted the Yondaime. In that moment the sphere of malignant energy was instantly teleported to a location several miles away from the village. The explosion shook the very foundation of the village, but it was safe for the moment. Grabbing one of his signature tri-pronged kunai, Minato Namikaze launched it above the head of the Kyuubi and appeared in an instant about 30 feet above the massive beast. The instant he appeared he bit his thumb and began going through another set of seals. "Kachiyose no Jutsu," shouted the Namikaze. In a puff of smoke appeared one of the largest toads ever seen in Konoha. His name was Gamabunta, the chain-smoking chief toad. Minato, why have you summoned me?" grumbled the toad chieftain. "I need you to restrain the Kyuubi while I prepare to transport the beast out of the village. I will need a few seconds to gather the necessary chakra," responded the Hokage. "The Kyuubi? Who do you think I am, Gaki?" grumbled the toad as he crashed down on the head of the Kyuubi, eliciting an ear-splitting roar from the kitsune. "Fine, I've always wanted a fur coat." "Arigato Gamabunta-sama," replied the cage as he finished the seals and began channeling the necessary chakra. Just as the monster began to gather his chakra for another blast, the Yondaime finished the preparation necessary. "Hiraishin!" shouted the Namikaze, instantly teleporting them miles away from the village to a safe house where inside were none other than his newborn son and his wife, Uzumaki Kushina. In that moment Uzumaki Kushina stepped outside, red hair billowing in the wind, a despairing look etched upon her face. There was only one way they would be able to restrain the Kyuubi now that he was released from her seal. Jinchuriki, the power of human sacrifice, and it couldn't be her. After having the Kyuubi ripped out of her body by the strange masked man, it would be impossible to use her as the host of the Kyuubi once again. Despite being Uzumaki, the strain of childbirth and the extraction of the Kyuubi left her on the verge of death. The only thing keeping her standing was the thought of protecting her son, Namikaze Naruto. "Kushina, get back inside, I will handle this. I need to begin the sealing immediately while I still can. You must survive and be there for our son. I will use the Shiki Fujin, Reaper Death Seal, and seal the Kyuubi within him," explained Minato with a grim look of determination. The Shiki Fujin was a kinjutsu, or forbidden technique that took the soul of the caster and target within the Shinigami where they would suffer for all eternity. Minato would sacrifice anything to give his wife and child a safer future. He would no longer be able to keep his promise of world peace to his sensei. Maybe he wasn't the child of prophecy, but it didn't matter. He would protect his precious people with his last breath. Seeing the look in her husband's eyes, she knew what she had to do. She could slowly feel her life force fading as she looked upon the mighty beast, and in that moment realized that if Minato gave his life sealing this monster, their child would end up an orphan regardless. With a breath she readied her special chakra chains to restrain the beast. "I'm sorry Minato, but I can't allow you to seal this beast within my son," Kushina said with a determined look in her eyes. "That burden is mine." If anyone will seal the beast, it will be me. Kushina, we don't have time to. Minato was interrupted as one of Kushina's chakra chains enveloped him and tied him down to a tree. In that same moment the rest of her chains tied down the Kyuubi with Gamabunta still sitting atop him. Once tied down, Gamabunta, deeming the situation handled, dispersed with a grim nod of approval to Kushina. To his horror the Yondaime began to watch the woman of his dreams, his wife, his lover, the mother of his son, began ritualistic suicide as she started the seals for the Shiki Fugen. I'm sorry Minato-kun, sighed Kushina, it seems that you'll get to watch Naruto grow into a fine young man. Make sure he eats his veggies, makes lots and lots of friends. Oh, and Minato, keep him away from Jiraiya Databane. With a smile she finished the seals with a cough and drew the Kyuubi's yin chakra out of his body and into the seal on her stomach created by the Shiki Fugen. She then transferred the yang half of the chakra into the squalling blue-eyed blonde-haired baby boy on the ground next to her. Grow up and be strong Naruto-kun. Know that I will always love you, Tte. And with those final words Uzumaki Kushina took her last breath. Kushina! Cried Minato, and in that moment the chains binding him to the tree were released. In a flash of yellow he was by her side, tears streaming down his face as he picked up his now deceased wife, stroking her beautiful fire-red hair. Gone was the kindred spirit that was the red-hot habanero. Never again would he hear her sweet melodious laugh, and worst of all, he couldn't keep his promise to protect his precious people. I promise Naruto will grow up to be strong. The strongest shinobi this village has ever seen. The Yondaime said with a determined look in his eyes. In that moment something changed. The man who once wore his heart on his shoulder was no more. In his place stood a cold calculating man, not unlike the Nidaime Hokage, Senju Tobarama. He would not allow for another incident like this to occur. He could not lose another of his precious people. Naruto will be trained correctly and he will not fail like his father did today. Minato stood wiping the tears from his eyes. As he looked behind him he noticed the Sandaime arriving with a squad of Anbu. In that moment he began formulating the plans necessary in order to protect Naruto. He would conceal his identity and eliminate any relation to Minato for his protection. Only those who knew his true relationship with Kushina would know who this boy was. Before anyone could take notice of the baby in Minato's arms, he began to draw a seal upon the back of Naruto's neck. This seal would change his hair color from blonde to red, in order to conceal his relationship to the boy. He would continue the facade he and Kushina created for the village years before and would take custody of his best friend's son. The boy's father would officially be Uzumaki Arashi, to everyone who didn't know his true heritage. Everyone knew that Minato and Kushina dated for a while, but after a time it was said they drifted apart. This was all a ploy to keep Kushina safe from Minato's enemies. Once he proposed and they agreed to start their family, he adopted the alias Arashi and would use a henge transformation. Through the henge he would transform into an imposing man standing at 6 feet 4 inches, with red hair and a scarred face, who would pose as Kushina's new boyfriend, lover. Meanwhile Minato would create a shadow clone to be seen with them every once in a while. This served to draw any suspicious thoughts from nosy villagers about any possible affairs between the Hokage and his once lover. Only Kakashi knew of the arrangement, as the boy had gone through too many hardships to be denied the comfort of their family. He became almost like a son to Minato and he couldn't bear to withhold the knowledge that he would soon have an Otuto, a little brother. Hiruzen arrived just as Minato stood and turned, with a small bundle cradled in his arms. A tuft of red hair could be seen from within the blanket, and with that he let loose a sigh of relief. Thank Kami the boy had lived. Hiruzen's eyes scanned the field and took notice of the peaceful look on Kushina's face and noticed she was no longer breathing. His breath hitched upon closer inspection when he saw a familiar seal on her stomach. She had sacrificed her life to stop the Kyuubi. He slowly approached Minato and spoke. I'm so sorry for your loss Minato. I know you and Kushina were extremely close. I wish it didn't have to come to this. Minato leveled his gaze with the Hokage and in that moment Hiruzen realized that something had died within Minato. Losing his best friend must have taken a larger toll on the boy than he thought. He quickly decided to change the subject and deal with the situation at a more appropriate. He was about to speak. Minato spoke. Her son was all that Minato managed to croak out. With those words, Hiruzen took a closer look at the small bundle within Minato's arms. His eyes narrowed when he noticed the seal on the boy's stomach and 6 prominent whisker marks on his cheeks, 3 on each cheek. So, Kushina used her own son as the next vessel for the Kyuubi, thought the Sandame. What a burden to be placed upon such a young child. The Sandame was broken from his thoughts when Minato spoke with conviction. The boy will be living with me. I will help continue the Uzumaki legacy through this boy, Uzumaki Naruto. Hiruzen gathered the council, we have much to discuss. With that, Minato disappeared in a yellow flash, leaving the former cage and the Anbu guards to wonder just what was in store for the future of Konohagakure no Sato. The council chambers were located underneath the Hokage Tower right in front of the Anbu headquarters. This was deemed one of the safest locations and one of the most easily defensible positions in the entire village. Underneath the village ran a series of tunnels used by the Anbu regiment daily, in order to secure the village and allow for the protection of their citizens. There were about 25 different escape routes within the council room alone, allowing each council member an alternative route of escape and securing the hierarchy of the village command. Within these series of tunnels were also the evacuation routes for the civilian citizens. These routes were shallower than the Anbu tunnels, but had hidden passages leading towards the Anbu command to allow for immediate response to compromised evacuation sectors. Within the council room itself were 2 maps. One was a rectangular map of the elemental nations designed into the floor, which allowed for 10 cushions to be arranged around the left and right of the map. 2 cushions were also placed at what could be called the back of the map. On each cushion was the symbol of the clan to which the council seat belonged. On the left of the table sat the Hyuga clan head, Hyuga Hiyashi, leader of Konoha's Sentry Division. The Aburame clan head, Aburame Shibi, leader of Konoha's Cryptanalysis Division. The Inazuka clan head, Inazuka Kudamaru, leader of Konoha's Hunter Nin. The Kurama clan head, Kurama Murakumo, leader of Konoha's Research Division. The Anbu commander, Identity Unknown, leader of Konoha's Anbu Division. On the right of the table sat the Uchiha clan head, Uchiha Fugaku, leader of Konoha's police force. The Sarutobi clan head, Sarutobi Sasuke, leader of Konoha's Barrier Division. The Nara clan head, Nara Shikaku, Junin commander of Konoha's forces and head strategist. The Yamanaka clan head, Yamanaka Inoichi, leader of Konoha's Torture and Interrogation Division. The Akamichi clan head, Akamichi Shuza, leader of Konoha's Food and Drug Division. The 2 cushions placed at the back of the map were ceremonial cushions placed for the Senju clan head and an Uzumaki representative promised from the original treaty before the destruction of Uzushiogakure. To the right of the map of the elemental nations was a second map. This one was a smaller, circular map containing the village of Konoha with each district highlighted and divided into sectors. Each sector with one entrance within a 15-foot wall littered with seals that prevent chakra clinging. Each wall had its own gate which would only be closed during an attack on the village. The only gate that regularly opens and closes is the main gate at the main wall. Sector 1 is the furthest sector from the main gate and the most secure. This sector houses the Hokage Mansion, the Senju clan compound and an honorary Uzumaki clan compound, the Hokage Tower and the hospital. Sector 2 is where the more luxurious amenities could be found along with several of the prominent merchant homes. This sector houses the hot springs for Konohagakure as well as the Hyuga compound to the north, the Uchiha compound to the south and the Sarutobi compound in the center. The road forks around the Soroboi compound leading to 2 different choke points that can be easily defended. Sector 3 is where you will find the minor clan compounds of the Nara, Yamanaka, Aburame, Inazuka, Kurama, and the Akamichi. Here is also where you will find most of the civilian population as well as Konoha's Ninja Academy and Civilian Academy. Sector 4 is the Trading and Merchant District. This is where most of Konoha's commerce occurs and where you'll find most of the peddlers that generate Konoha's revenue. This is also where you will find the Chunin Exams Arena and the Red Light District. In south corner of this district are also where the slums can be found along with the seedy underground that can accompanies most major villages. Sitting around this map were 6 civilian council members, each council members chosen to represent the civilian population, and one member from the fire daimyo's court to ensure that every council decision made was for the betterment of the Land of Fire and not just for the betterment of Konohagakure. On this civilian council was the leader of Konoha's merchant guild Gensui Amagiri, the leader of Konoha's weapons guild Higurashi Muramasa, the leader of Konoha's transportation guild Gozu Genji, the leader of the Land of Fire's samurai forces Kubasaki Koza, the representative of the citizens of Konoha Kazashi Haruno, the fire daimyo's council representative Yamato Kuroda. At the head of the entire council room were 5 chairs. The middle chair was the largest of the 5, denoting a superiority above the rest. From left to right the seats were occupied by the Hokage's personal advisors. Shimura Danzo, leader of the Anbu Root Division. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage. The center chair, currently empty, normally occupied by the current Hokage. Utatane Kaharu, former teammate of the Sandaime. Mitokado Homura, former teammate of the Sandaime. Together they rounded out the rest of the council, a total of 21 members on the Konoha Council. Each council member has 1 vote towards any village decision and a majority of over 50% is required to pass any law or decision. The deciding vote shall be made by the Hokage should the council be split on any decision. With the council called to order, everyone waited with hushed tones for their Hokage to arrive and begin the proceedings. Groups of council members were speaking quietly to one another about the ramifications of the Kyuubi attack and what actions must be taken by the village in order to recuperate their strength. As the noise of the conversations began to increase in volume, the door to the council chambers opened and the Yondaime Hokage strode silently into the room. The door closed quietly behind the Yondaime, his eyes cold and focused, his mind still calculating all the necessary steps to ensure the survival of his village, but more importantly the survival of his son. With the entrance of the Hokage, the council members became silent, the tension in the room thick enough to cut it with a knife. Many of the shinobi council members noticed a change in their Hokage's demeanor. Gone was the normal warmth of the Yondaime, everyone could see it in his eyes. There was no sparkle of humor, none of the usual playfulness associated with the living legend. A few seconds later the Yondaime arrived at his council chair, instantly flanked by 2 of his most loyal Anbu, Inu and Yamato. Taking his seat, he looked out upon his council members, eyes slightly narrowing as he passed by the Uchiha clan head, an action that went unnoticed by all, except Shimura Danzo. I need to find a way to use this to my advantage, thought Danzo. During this time the mind of Inu was racing mile a minute. Something's wrong with sensei. I haven't seen him like this since Obito. Did something happen to Kushina sensei? What about my Otuto, is he okay? His thoughts were interrupted when a civilian council member spoke, obviously impatient and wanting answers as to what happened tonight. Yondaime-sama, what happened today? Where did the Kyuubi come from? Where did the Kyuubi go? Is it gone for good or will it come back? Fervently said Gensui Amagiri, his voice gaining confidence, conviction and volume as he spoke. My merchants are terrified and are threatening to take their business elsewhere. We cannot allow an incident like this to happen again. A murmur of agreement coming from a few of the civilian council members, while the shinobi members stayed silent. There was truth to their words, they thought as they solemnly looked up at their leader waiting for a response. Taking a deep breath, Minato began. Today was an attack on our village by a man possessing a Sharingan. At this council gasped, throwing glances at Fugaku, who sat stoically watching the Hokage. Seeing no visible reaction from Fugaku, Minato continued. He claimed to be Uchiha Madara and possessed a spacetime ninjutsu not unlike my own. He was also quite skilled in fuinjutsu. He was able to extract the Kyuubi from Uzumaki Kushina. At this point there were murmurs amongst the council. What did he mean by extract from Kushina? Was she a Jinchuriki without their knowledge? And summon him into the middle of our village, controlling his actions through a genjutsu, continued Minato. As for when it'll come back, it won't. Kushina gave her life to seal the Kyuubi within her own son, Uzumaki Naruto. She created a martyr out her own son for the sake of this village. He stopped, giving the council members a moment to let this sink in. His voice hitched when he spoke about his wife's death, not that anyone would connect the dots. Kushina-sensei is dead? Thought the young Anbu. At the 13 years old he had too many loved ones pass away. His thoughts were becoming darker and darker. Until he remembered Naruto, quickly stealing his resolve, his eyes hardened. My Otuto is still alive and I will protect him with my last breath. I will not stand defenseless and allow another of my family members die. With that final conviction of duty, he focused back on the council. Several members let out a shocked gasp, looking up at their leader, hoping it was some kind of joke. Kushina was one of their strongest kunoichi, second only to Senju Tsunade. The loss of an S-rank shinobi is a huge blow to their military, one that the enemy will be sure to take advantage of. One council member could only mutter a single word about the whole situation. Troublesome. The shock of the revelation masked behind his calculative eyes as he realized all the signs were evident of her Jinchuriki status once he pieced them all together. He just couldn't imagine that one of his closest friends contained the strongest of the 9 Biju within her the entire time. Hey, it explains why that woman was so troublesome, thought Shikaku with a grim smile. The civilian council was far more worried about the ramifications of the demon being within a baby. What if the demon was released again? What if he began to control the boy? No, it had to be stopped. This was their chance to finally rid themselves of the beast. What are we waiting for? Where's the boy? We will kill him and get rid of the Kyuubi once and for all. Let Kushina's sacrifice not be in vain. That boy is no longer her son but a demon incarnate, shouted Genji, a murmur of agreements coming from the civilian council. As soon as the words left his mouth, the temperature of the room dropped several degrees and the strongest killing intent was unleashed on the man sitting at the head of the council room. Normally this amount of killing intent would put most civilians in a comatose state. Being on the council, these civilians, while still unnerved, had learned to deal with the killing intent released by shinobi, not that it did them much good. If looks could kill, Genji would have dropped dead the moment he looked into the Yondaimi's eyes. They promised nothing but pain if this child was harmed. No one will touch the boy, said the Namikaze with an icy steel to his voice. He will live with me and be trained to be a proper shinobi of this village. I will not let everything Kushina's sacrificed herself for be destroyed by idiots who don't know the difference between a kunai and a scroll. Do you understand me? With those final words he sent a concentrated blast of killing intent towards the portly man, almost rendering him unconscious. Hi Hokage-sama, answered a profusely sweating Genji. He would not openly dare to defy the Yondaime, but the matter still had to be put up to vote. At this Danzo spoke up. Are you so sure it is in the village's best interest that you take care of the boy, Minato? He would be much better off being trained by me to become a root shinobi. A weapon like him should not be wasted. I motion that you, our council, allow me to train him to be an asset to this village, lest he be used by this third party against our village once more. Quote, some of the shinobi council members seemed to be placated by this proposal. If anyone could train a perfect weapon for the village, it was Danzo. Just as Genji was about to second the motion, Minato intervened. No, the boy will stay with me. Unless you've been hiding a Class 9 SEAL master from me in your organization, then no one other than myself or Jiraiya sensei is capable of dealing with the boy's seal. I make this promise to you now, I shall personally tighten the boy's seal every year on this very night to ensure the safety of this village, said Minato. Quickly mastering his anger, he collected his thoughts. I motion to allow the boy sanctuary in my home. Allow me to mold this young boy into a shinobi worthy of being proud of. Worthy of being called a Konoha shinobi. Looking out into the room, he seemed to have won over some of his subordinates with this decision. Who will stand by my decision? At this moment Shikaku saw the opportunity to put this issue to rest by standing by the man he trusted most. Not the Yondaime Hokage, or the Yellow Flash, but by Namikaze Minato, his best friend and the best man he knew. He quickly stood before anyone could refute the decision and spoke. The Nara second this motion, and accept the Yondaime's proposal. Are we in agreement? One by one each council member stood and cast their vote for the proposal. The Hyuga clan accepts. The Inazuka clan accepts. The Aburame clan declines. The Kurama clan declines. The Anbu accept. The Uchiha clan declines. The Sarutobi clan accepts. The Yamanaka clan accepts. The Akamichi clan accepts. The Merchant Guild declines. The Weapons Guild accepts. The Transpiration Guild declines. The Firelords Samurai accept. The Daimyo accepts. The Civilians decline. Root declines. The Sandame accepts. The Advisors decline. With the votes tallied, it was 11 in favor of the Yondaime's proposal, and 9 against. There would be no need for a tie-breaking vote from the Hokage. Pleased with the results so far, Minato switched from protective father back to administrative cage. There was much work to be done. Construction contracts needed to be written, funeral services prepared, and shinobi to recall. Hokage Manor. Minato had just arrived home from an extremely long day. He reached into his refrigerator and began pulling out the ingredients for a sandwich, disliking the fact that he now had to make his own sandwiches. Honestly, what man makes his own sandwich? With this thought, he was sadly reminded of the events that occurred earlier in the day. From fighting a Biju to losing his beloved wife, and finally protecting his son from the very village his wife gave her life to protect. It was a long, heart-wrenching day. Enough to make any sane man wallow in self-loathing and go crazy. Unfortunately, or one could say fortunately, Minato wasn't a sane man by any means. He had killed thousands upon the bloody plains and lost hundreds of comrades as well, but he wouldn't hesitate to do so again in the name of the village. There was one death that had taken the largest toll on him, and that was the death of his young student Uchiha Obito. That incident was now second only to the pain of losing his wife, but the pain was no less powerful. It was what he surmised to be similar to the pain of losing a son, a pain he hoped he never had to endure. Of course, the circumstances were different back then. He had a clear target to focus his rage, his bloodlust, his sorrow. That day on the bloody plains, Iwa learned what happened when you angered Konoha's yellow flash. Now there was no objective, no endgame. There was no target for his hatred, for his pain other than the mysterious masked man claiming to be Uchiha Madara. With a growl unbecoming of his status, he vowed to make that man pay for what he did to his family. Until then, he would bottle up that pain, that hatred, and use it to fuel. Wait, no. This is the wrong way to think. This is the Uchiha way, thought Minato with a scowl, taking out his frustrations of the sandwich with his knife, destroying the sandwich in the process. Damn, now I have to make another. I have to let go of all this rage, all of this pain. I cannot allow myself to walk down the path of hatred. I must think of what's best for the village, and more importantly Naruto-kun. The thought of his son enough to make the young Kage calm down. No, I guess there are no sane shinobi, thought Minato with a slight sigh, as he replayed his thoughts. We left our sanity behind the day that we put on our Hittites. The only comfort he could take in this realization was that he did not enjoy taking a life. Whatever shred of humanity that represented, he clung to like a lifeline, for himself and for his loved ones. Once he finished preparing his sandwich, he was slightly disappointed in the taste of the food. Not as good as Kushina-chan's, but I can live, thought Minato as he slowly walked towards Naruto's room. He slightly opened the door, taking a peek inside the room. It was completely furnished with all the baby essentials. Instead of the blue one would normally see for a newborn boy, the room was decorated completely in orange at Kushina's insistence. She would not have her son in anything less. Orange, after all, was the best color in the world. Minato smiled at the memory, trying to ignore the pain that shot through his heart. Naruto seemed to stir as Minato approached the side of the crib, sensing the presence of a familiar figure. With a fatherly smile, Minato bent over and picked the red-headed boy up, cradling him in his arms. Hello little Naru-chan, it's your two-san. We can't tell anyone, but that doesn't matter, you'll also be my little boy. I will stop at nothing to protect you. The sleepy, confused look on his son's face was enough to make him grin from ear to ear, and make any female within viewing distance squeal with delight and shout Kawaii. This precious moment wiped away all of the troubles that plagued Minato. In that moment it was just father and son, nothing else existed in their quiet bubble of joy. Uchiha compound. Within the main house was a man pacing within his study. This man was none other than Uchiha Fugaku, head of the Uchiha clan. The normally stoic, emotionless clan head allowed a brief glimpse of anger to cross his face. Those bastards on the council, nothing I do will gain their trust. Now they will suspect the Uchiha clan for this incident and further limit our power, thought Fugaku, pacing back and forth. At this pace he'd burn a hole in the floor. Damn it. Damn them, how could they do this to the Uchiha clan? We founded this god-forsaken village. If only he could control that Kyuubi boy, then maybe he would have enough power to make those bastards on the council see that the Uchiha were not to be trifled with. With this final thought he walked over to his private liquor cabinet and poured himself a cup of sake. He began to replay the events of the council. He could still feel the gaze of each and every member on the back of his neck as if he were once again in their presence. He never once belittled himself to look at the other clan heads. Though, he could especially feel the gaze of the Hyuga. Oh, how he must have relished the position Fugaku found himself in. He would not give them the satisfaction though, leaving his focus solely on the Yondaime gauging his reaction, and ignoring the rest of the council. He thought he was so smart, hiding his glares, but Fugaku knew. He saw the ice-cold glare that was sent in his direction when he sat down on his throne. If he were speaking he would have spit the word out. He would not stand for this insult to his clan. With the image of the Hokage's glare in his mind he shivered, remembering the cold aura that the Hokage had given off today. He surely was a force to be reckoned with, and currently none of his shinobi were at the Hokage's level. That didn't mean that there couldn't be. His thoughts quickly drifted towards Itachi and his cousin Shisui. The boys were geniuses. Even at the age of 7 he could tell the amount of potential the boys held. It was potential that hadn't been seen within the Uchiha clan since Kagami, Shisui's grandfather. Unfortunately their minds were already being poisoned by the Hokage's meddling. It seemed he also realized the potential the boys held. They absorbed every word about placing the village before anything else. Lies. That's all they were being fed. The clan is before anything else. The Uchiha are the elite, and as such nothing comes before the clan, not the village, not even the Hokage. But how was the question? Who could turn the boy into the perfect weapon to be used against the Yondaime and the Kyuubi brat? Sitting there his thoughts wandered back to the council meeting, and what a waste of time it was. Spindless, at the beck and call of the Hokage like lapdogs, every last one of them. Well, all except the elders. With that final thought his eyes widened in realization. There was only one man within Konoha that could create the weapons Fugaku seeked. Shimura Danzo. He entertained the thought. Of course he didn't need to know the real purpose, he was just a means to an end. Fugaku would ensure that they weren't brainwashed into becoming blindly obedient Konoha lapdogs. He of course was no fool. He knew what route was and would take the right measures to ensure that his investments remained on the right side when the time came to unleash his assets upon Konoha. He would have to have a meeting with Danzo soon, there would be no time to waste. Fugaku seemed to delight in these thoughts, finally easing his mind of his present troubles. Finishing the rest of his drink he threw the finished bottle into the trash and walked out of his study towards his bedroom. Yes, Konoha will soon find out what happens when you slight the Uchiha clan, thought Fugaku as he slowly closed the door to his study, locking with a slight click behind him. 4 years later. During the first 2 years the village of Konoha was slowly regaining its strength after the Kyuubi incident. The day following the attack Minato recalled all Konoha shinobi within the border of Hai no Kuni, the land of fire, and increasing border foreign missions were put on hold as the village was being rebuilt. Most of the damage occurred to sectors 3 and 4, concentrating most of the damage around the trading and merchant district and the civilian residency quarter, with minor damage occurring near the slums and red light districts. With the attack the Sarutobi and Kurama clan saw some of the more devastating losses, each losing around 50 Junin and Chunin level shinobi. Some believed that these were insignificant losses compared to the losses of regular forces, which totaled near the 400s, but with some of the major and minor clans shrinking in population, this was a huge loss to both clans respectively. Konoha also lost around 3,000 civilian citizens to the beast in the residency quarters before they could be evacuated. During the 3rd year, just as Konoha finished its reconstruction, the Hokage determined that much of its new strength would come from their ninja academy. As such the Yondaime implemented a new educational reform within the ninja academy. The times of peace were slowly being whittled away and the young boys and girls attending the academy needed to be properly trained. Minato appointed the Sandaime Hokage to be in charge of the new academic policy, which required every aspiring genin shinobi to go through all 4 years of study at the younger children attending the civilian academy until the age of 8, where, with permission, they could apply to attend the shinobi academy. These past 4 years also served the Yondaime well. With the help of Jiraiya he had finally made progress within his sage training and was currently able to fuse with both elders with only slight alterations to his physique. Through this progress came the creation of another supplementary S-rank technique, the Senpo, Kankaku no Hiraishin Kekai. Sage Art. Sensory of the Hiraishin Barrier. This technique used specialized seals designed to absorb ambient nature chakra and turn it into a sensory barrier that allowed Minato the ability to sense foreign chakra within the confines of the barrier by absorbing sage chakra. This barrier had a radius of 5 miles and was placed within the center point of the entire village, the Sarutobi compound. Using an octagonal sealing array and various anchors at the cardinal points, this barrier allowed every Konoha shinobi to register his, her chakra with the barrier. This allowed Minato full awareness of foreign chakras and giving him the power to immediately respond to any threat within the village. The barrier was maintained by Konoha's barrier division led by Sarutobi Sasuke, and allowed the barrier division shinobi the ability to sense anyone attempting to sneak into the village. After everything, the Yondaime truly was the hero of his village. He was admired by the villagers and feared by all his enemies. To this day nobody had yet to get the better of the young Kage. No one except Hokage Manor, Naruto. Minato didn't know how or why, it must have been something he inherited from his mother, but the young redhead had a knack for chaos. Somehow he had found his way into Minato's weapon cache and stolen one of his kunai. He had been running around the house for the last 10 minutes, killing all the furniture in the house. He was currently hiding behind the curtains near the windowsill in the living room of the Hokage mansion. He quietly snickered at the thought of the blonde Kage running around the house looking for him. "He'll never find me here, this is my new ultimate hiding spot," thought the boy with a snicker. "Naruto, give me that kunai back this instant before I die, Gama-chan pink," shouted the annoyed blonde Kage as he walked towards the living room. If there was anything that would make the boy break, it would be his beloved Gama-chan, an orange frog plushie that his mother had purchased before the incident. Upon hearing Minato's words, Naruto paled. "No, not Gama-chan," he despaired, as he began to slowly pull the cutains back. Thinking back on his plan, he stopped. "I can't quit. With this new prank I'll beat the Hokage and be recognized as the strongest in the village. Then I'll buy 100 Gama-chans." Tightening his grip on the kunai, he went over the plan, giggling quietly at the thought of finally succeeding in one of his pranks. Walking into the living room, Minato noticed a bulge coming from the curtains. Taking a few steps forward, he realized it was quiet. Too quiet. The normally hyperactive boy must have something planned. Cautiously taking steps forward, Minato reviewed the room. There were no wires on the floor, no surprises hidden on the roof. What was he planning? At that moment he heard a giggle from the curtains, momentarily breaking his thoughts and distracting him as he passed by the couch, failing to notice the strategically placed wagon toy in the shadows. As his foot came down on the toy, his foot slipped backwards, making Minato fall forwards towards the curtains, stabilizing himself with a hand on the wall. In that moment Naruto chose to attack, bringing his kunai down towards the nape of the Hokage and holding it there with both hands. "Gotcha!" shouted the redhead in glee. A smirk crossed the blonde Kage's face as he poofed into white smoke, a look of confusion crossing the young boy's face as his uncle disappeared. In the confusion, the real Yondaime dropped from the ceiling onto the unsuspecting boy, bonking him lightly on the head. Within seconds the boy was neatly tucked under his arms as he led the boy towards the bathroom. Nay, that's unfair, Oji-san," huffed Naruto, annoyed at being bested once more. He wasn't really his uncle, but then again he wasn't his dad either. He had seen a picture of his mom and dad, but then again what else should he call the man that was raising him? "You cheated. Nothing's fair in the shinobi world, Naru-chan," chided a smirking Minato. The boy had potential, but he was still too young. "Besides, now that I've got you, it's bath time." The look of horror that crossed the boy's face was priceless. Thinking back to all the destroyed furniture, this more than made up for it. With a grin he plopped Naruto onto the bathroom floor and began preparing the bath. Once released, he made a break for the door, this time only making it a few feet before Minato flashed in front of the boy, quickly closing the door behind him. "You're not getting away that easily." With a light smack on the boy's forehead, the Yondaime applied a paralysis seal. "There, that will make things a lot easier," he said with a bemused grin. Unfortunately, this paralysis seal didn't stop the boy from speaking. "Bu. But why?" whined the indignant redhead. "There's no point in taking a shower if I'm just gonna get dirty again." Nay, you know it's true. Now Naruto, it's almost your bedtime. You don't want to go to sleep all sticky and nasty, That's just bad hygiene, chided the Namikaze. Naruto just looked at him with a blank stare. Why did he always try to confuse him with big words? Conceding defeat at the hands of the better opponent, Naruto quickly conceded. Now I'm going to take the seal off and you're going to take your bath like a good boy, okay? Okay, sighed a resigned Naruto. He did lose fair and square. With that, the night proceeded with no more commotions. Minato made dinner, ramen of course. He had a white apron tied to his waist, while Naruto played with some toad toys at the table. Placing the steaming bowls of ramen on the table, they both began to eat with a quiet chorus of "Itadakimasu." After a few minutes of silence, Minato turned to the boy and asked, "Are you excited to start up school, Naru-chan? It should be exciting. You get to meet more kids to play with." Truth be told, Naruto was excited at the prospect of meeting new friends. To this day he had only met Shikamaru, Choji and Sasuke Teme. Shikamaru's dad was his uncle's best friend and Choji's dad was part of the original Ino Shika Cho trio, so he went wherever Shikamaru went. He met Sasuke Teme because his mom was Naruto's mom's best friend growing up. Naruto had wondered where the Ino part was, but he never asked. To be honest, Naruto was just afraid because everywhere he went people would always look at him funny. They looked at him like he was an outsider and nobody else would let their kids play with him whenever he went to the park with Kakashi Nissan. It was almost like they blamed him for something, but he just didn't know what. Noticing the hesitation in the boy's answer, Minato immediately diagnosed the root of the problem. The Kyuubi. Unfortunately for Naruto, there was little he could do to hide Naruto's Jinchuriki status. When he proposed keeping it within the confines of the council chambers, he was immediately shot down. The council stating that assets like the Kyuubi Jinchuriki must be made public so that they did not seem weak to the other elemental nations. When put to vote, he was overruled 14-6. The only votes he managed to garner were of the original Ino Shika Cho members, the Sandaime, and the elders. Reaching over and ruffling the boy's head, he gave him a fatherly smile. "Don't worry, Naru-chan, you'll make lots of friends, I'm sure of it," said the young Kage. "Besides, you'll have Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Choji with you too, so you have nothing to worry about, right?" "Right," chirped the redhead, a smile slowly working onto his face. Nay, are you going to walk me to school tomorrow, Oji-san?" The hopeful look on the boy's face almost breaking his defenses. "Unfortunately, Naru-chan, I have a very important meeting tomorrow with some representatives from Kumo," intoned Minato, a slight frown marring his face at the thought of Kumo. He didn't forget about the time they tried to capture Kushina to turn her into a Jinchuriki. Naruto's smile quickly fell. Oh, Minato's heart broke at the look on the boy's face. It pained him to see his son so sad. "But, Kakashi-san said he would be more than happy to take you to school." A slight smile working his way onto the boy's face at the thought of seeing his Ni-san. "And the meetings shouldn't last very long, so I'll be there to pick you up from school, okay?" continued Minato. This caused the largest smile he'd seen to date to appear on the boy's face. With a sloppy slurp of his ramen broth, he quickly put his bowl down and rushed to his uncle's side. "I've got to get to bed quick so tomorrow can come faster. Good night, Oji-san." With those final words, he gave Minato a brothy kiss on the cheek and rushed towards his room to get into bed. Chuckling at his antics, Minato finished his meal before taking the bowls over to the sink and beginning to wash the dishes, letting his thoughts consume him. "Oh Kushina, how I wish you could be here with us today. You would be so proud of your son," thought Minato as he methodically washed each dish. "He's gonna grow up to be a fine man, I promise." With this final thought, he finished the last of the dishes, turned the lights off and walked towards his room, mentally preparing himself for the events of the next day. Hokage Manor. The following morning was a rushed one in the Namikaze household. A panicked Minato was hurriedly finishing packing Naruto's lunch, making sure everything was perfect. Throwing a glance over his shoulder, he noticed Naruto was eating at an inhuman pace. "Naruto, slow down before you choke on your eggs," he scolded. Meanwhile, Naruto sat at the table quickly scarfing down the eggs and rice his uncle had prepared for him. Every so often his eyes would glance to the front door in anticipation. If Kakashi didn't hurry, they were going to be late. He turned to hear his uncle say something about choking, but blew it off as unimportant. Behind him the door opened, entering a young Hitaki Kakashi. "Yo," said the ever-late teenager. At 17 years old he was on the fast track to becoming one of Konoha's elite Junin. He had gravity-defying white hair and had his headband covering his left eye. Over his face he had a blue mask. What was under it was as much a mystery to Naruto as was the concept of girls. Turning back to his orange book he let out a perverted giggle. Hearing the opening of a door, he quickly turned and let out a gasp seeing Kakashi standing in the doorway. Bad timing, as Naruto still had food in his mouth. Choking on his breakfast, he frantically waved his arms around trying to get Kakashi or his uncle's attention. Minato took one last look at the lunchbox. Ensuring everything was in order, he nodded his head in satisfaction. This should do, he thought, slowly turning to see Naruto turning purple frantically waving his arms around. Baka, what did I tell you about eating to fast? He sighed, walking over to the boy and quickly thumping him on his back 2 times, allowing the food to go down smoothly. Relief broke across the young Uzumaki's face as he could breathe again. Turning towards Kakashi, seeing him armed with his usual book, Minato let out a sigh. His sensei was slowly corrupting his student, one pervy book at a time. I can't slow down, Oji-san, today's the first day of school. Excitedly explained Naruto. Turning towards Kakashi he pointed a finger and shouted. You're late. Minato could only chuckle at his son's antics. Looking up at the disturbance, Kakashi sighed and closed the book. I passed by a black cat on my way here. I didn't want to get bad luck so I decided to take the long way around. At this explanation, both Minato and Naruto deadpanned. Minato was the first to speak. You overslept, didn't you? Looking at his sensei he shrugged. Neither denying or confirming his statement, Kakashi turned towards Naruto beckoning him forward with his hand. Come, we don't have all day you know. I have to get back to reading my book, he said with a giggle. Let's get you to school. Quickly forgetting his irritation with his older brother figure, Naruto grabbed his lunch from Minato and made his way towards the door. He quickly turned and shouted, See you later, Oji-san. Good luck on your first day, Naruto, replied Minato. Turning to see the empty house, he realized just how quickly time passed by. Broken from his thoughts by the sound of an alarm he had set to remind him of his meeting with Kumo, he summoned an ANBU, quickly ordering him to clean up the mess. Putting on his white haori, red flames adorning the bottom and the kanji for fourth on the back, he quickly disappeared in a flash of yellow, arriving just a few minutes before the meeting was slated to begin. The Anbu turned to look at the mess left behind. It looked like a bomb had gone off in the kitchen. The Anbu sweat dropped. No one said anything about being the Hokage's maid when I signed up for Anbu, he grumbled, as he bent over to pick up the remains of Naruto and the Yondaime's breakfast. Streets of Konoha. Walking down the road, Naruto noticed some of the glances the villagers shot in his direction. Confused as to why they still looked at him that way, he turned to Kakashi and asked, Hey Ni-san, do you know why all the villagers look at me funny? Hearing this, Kakashi's eyes narrowed slightly. He noticed them already? Thought Kakashi. How long can we keep the secret from him? Looking around he noticed some of the glares that were sent in his direction. Elevating his killing intent in their direction and shooting them a withering glare, the civilians turned to go about their business. You're just imagining things, Naruto. It must be the nerves for you first day. Let's hurry or we'll be late, he said with a trademarked eye smile. At this, Naruto shot him a glare. Kakashi clearly oblivious to the irony of the statement. Yeah, I guess you're right, let's go. Once they arrived, Naruto took a long look at the blue civilian academy building. The kanji for fire prominently displayed on the front. With barely contained excitement he thought to himself, 4 more years until I can get permission to join the ninja academy. Looking over at Kakashi he smiled. Finally he was on the road to becoming a kick-ass shinobi like his Ni-san and Oji-san. Kakashi noticed the boy's look and gave Naruto an eye smile before speaking. Alright Naruto, this is where I leave you. Good luck in school, alright? If you manage to stay out of trouble I may even take you out for some ramen at Ichiraku's, how's that sound? At the mention of Ichiraku's, Naruto nodded fervently. I promise to be good, Ni-san, but, and here a glint of barely contained excitement could be seen in his eyes, you have to buy me all the ramen I want, deal? Said Naruto. Deal, said Kakashi, thinking nothing bad could come from it. Besides, how much ramen could a 4-year-old eat anyway? Ya nay. With those final words Kakashi disappeared in a whirlwind of leaves, leaving the awestruck 4-year-old standing there. Naruto turned in search of his other friends. As he walked through the crowds of students, he noticed two girls standing in front of one of the classrooms quietly whispering to each other. One girl had short blonde hair that came to her shoulders, while the other girl had short pink hair in a similar style. They seemed to be staring at one of the other boys in the classroom, a little shy to enter the classroom. Taking a look at the number by the door, he noticed it was the same number as the one of the piece of paper he had in his hand. With a deep breath, he walked up to the girls and introduced himself. "Hiya, my name's Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto. Are you guys in this class too?" Startled by the sudden new voice, the girls turned to look at the boy, taking in his red hair and appearance. For his first day of school, Naruto chose to wear a white clan shirt with an orange Uzumaki whirlpool prominently displayed in the center, blue pants and a green Froggy book bag. His red hair stood out among the varying shades of brown and black that could be seen walking behind him. The blonde girl seemed to be the more confident of the two. She stepped forward, upset that he scared them. "None of your business," screeched the blonde. "Now move, you're blocking the view of the pretty boy with the black hair." A little hurt at the outburst, he tentatively looked inside, confusion etched on his face. He wanted to see who this pretty black-haired fellow was. When he peeked inside, he was greeted by Shikamaru's lazy form sleeping on one of the desks. His pineapple-style haircut was difficult to miss even from way over here. Naruto's sweat dropped and turned towards the blonde and her friend with a grin. "Payback time. You like Shikamaru?" he said, pointing an accusing finger at the rude blonde. "Ahahahaha. You like Shika, you like Shika." At the sound of a loud shout, Shikamaru lifted his face from his desk, wondering who disturbed his sleep. Next to him, Choji quietly munched on his chips. Checking the doorway, he saw his troublesome best friend Naruto, accusing Ino of something, while he danced around with a finger pointed at her. "Oi, Naruto," he said lazily. "Leave Ino alone, she'll just get more troublesome." With that, he put his head back on the table and went back to sleep. Ino's face was immediately flushed with anger and embarrassment. "No," she said, hitting the red-haired boy over the head. She then pointed over to another black-haired boy seated behind Shikamaru. He wore a high-collared black shirt and his hair stuck out from the back of his head, reminiscent of a duck's backside. He looked over, confused by all the commotion, until he spotted Naruto. That baka was always getting into trouble. "That's the boy," said Ino with a sigh. "He's so cute." With those final words, Ino and the pink-haired girl huddled together and started giggling. Naruto squinted his eyes at the boy. He looked vaguely familiar. Stepping into the room to take a closer look, Naruto realized who the boy was. Turning to look at the girls, he said, Nay, what's so special about Sasuke?" he said with a confused look. "He can't even go to sleep without his favorite teddy bear, Kuma-chan." Upon hearing these words, Sasuke's face flushed. He rose angrily from his chair and pointed an accusing finger at Naruto. "Hey, that's not true," shouted the indignant Uchiha. "It was only one time because you were making creepy noises for him under the bed. Besides, you can't sleep without Gama-chan and Shika can't sleep without his deer." Looking around the room, Sasuke noticed they were rapidly becoming the center of attention. He sat back down with a huff, quickly realizing what Naruto just made him admit. He muttered something about stupid redheads and revealing top secrets to girls. They didn't even like girls yet. Upon seeing the outburst, the girls in the classroom had stars in their eyes with a shout of "Kawaii." Ino and her pink-haired friend were no different, with hearts in their eyes. He just couldn't get any kutra. Naruto's sweat dropped, hoping for a different reaction. Nonetheless, he was pleased with his work. He proudly paraded Gama-chan around town, but he knew Sasuke kept Kuma-chan a secret. He delighted in Sasuke's embarrassment, at least until Sasuke Teme started getting even more attention from the girls. With a sigh, he went to sit next Shikamaru, who had gone back to sleep, not caring that his dear plushie had been revealed to his new classmates. As she passed Naruto, Ino gave him a withering gaze and stuck her tongue out. Her pink-haired friend, who had yet to introduce herself, continued walking with her. The two girls proceeded to take seats on opposite sides of Sasuke, stealing glances at his face every once in a while. He looked around the room and noticed there were some weird kids in his class. Right behind Sasuke was a kid who had red triangle markings on his face. Next to him was a girl with white eyes. Right next to her was another kid that wore sunglasses and a thick white coat in the middle of summer. As he continued to scan the room, he heard the door open and close as a young civilian instructor walked in, making everyone fall silent. "Good morning, class. Welcome to your first day at the academy. My name is Akame Iwana, and during the next 4 years you'll be learning basic functions like reading, writing and math so you can all be well-rounded individuals. After the 4th year you'll be allowed to take the Ninja Academy exam where you can continue on to become a shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. There is no greater honor. For those of you who do not pass this test, you will be moved on through the various trade schools that are offered here at the Civilian Academy, where we will ready you for a life outside of school." And thus began the longest lecture of Naruto's young life. As the instructor droned on, Naruto was lost in his thoughts. Man, this was going to be a long day, thought the young redhead, quickly realizing there was nothing exciting about school. I wonder what Oji-san and Kakani are up to right now. Hokage Tower. It seemed that both the men of the Namikaze household were having rough mornings. After listening for 2 hours to the proposal made by Kumo about a possible alliance, he now had to sit and go through mountains of paperwork. All he needed was a little Kaiden Jutsu, fire technique, and he could finish the paperwork in 2 seconds flat. Quickly shaking off his pyrotechnic tendencies, he thought back to the meeting. It had gone relatively well. Kumo was not asking for anything extravagant. All they wanted was an increase in trade across their borders and security for foreign missions operating within Hai no Kuni. In return, they promised open borders and no hostility towards Leaf Nin on foreign missions within Kaminari no Kuni, Land of Lightning. It was an intriguing proposal as it allowed for more revenue to flow through Konoha, but there was something off about the whole thing that he just couldn't put his finger on. Kumo has always been an isolationist. Why are they suddenly interested in a new allegiance? With a slight shake of the head, he decided to just leave it for their council meeting later today so they could put it to vote. Kami knows that's all those bastards like to do anyway. The last time they had a meeting, they spent an hour trying to vote on what kind of lunch they should get. I motion for pizza. I motion for sushi. I motion for ramen. Back and forth for an hour with each member gave a diatribe as to why their food choice was better. It drove him insane. Putting 2 fingers on the bridge of his nose and resting his arm on his desk, he was starting to wonder why he even took the hat in the first place. All it brought him was more stress. In that moment, Minato heard the window open and a deep, gruff voice starting to speak. He's starting to regret the decision of taking the hat, Minato? Looking over at the window, he saw a large, muscular man sitting on the windowsill. He had long white hair that ran down his back, with 2 strands of hair that framed his face. On his forehead he wore a steel headband with the kanji for oil. There were 2 long red markings just underneath his eyes that ran all the way down to his jawline, and he wore a forest green haori over a mesh shirt, with a sleeveless red jacket over top that was open down the middle. On his back he carried an overly large scroll that was known to Minato as the Frog Summoning Contract. This man was none other than Jiraiya of the Sannin, one of the most powerful shinobi Konoha had ever produced, and Minato's mentor. With a slight sigh, Minato looked back over to his desk and said, "No one ever told me there would be this much paperwork. I just want to burn it all to the ground. I mean, why do we need mission reports for D ranks? I always just saw the Sandaime lazying about and thought, man, that'd be an awesome job to have." Minato's shoulders slumped over at the thought of reading another Tora the Cat mission report. With a knowing smirk, Jiraiya, a glint of mischief appearing in his eyes. "Oh? You mean Sensei never taught you the secret to paperwork?" Perking up at this so-called secret, Minato looked over to his sensei. "What do you mean secret to paperwork? There is no shortcut. I can't even get my assistant to do it. I always get scolded and told I need to know everything that happens in the village." With a grin, Jiraiya continued, But there is a secret. It's how the Sandaime was able to complete my collection of Icha books. But I guess you'll just have to figure it out on your own." Unless, he knew he had Minato hooked the minute he mentioned a secret to the mortal enemy of Kage. It was almost too easy. "Nay, unless what?" said Minato, sounding not unlike Naruto when he got excited. "I'll tell you the secret to paperwork that Sensei always used, if you help me do some research." A lecherous grin plastered over Jiraiya's face. At this, Minato's sweat dropped. Leave it to his sensei to still be perving around at a time like this. Still, he did need a break, and he hadn't gone researching with his sensei since he was promoted to Junin all those years back. Jiraiya had convinced him to take a peek right as Kushina-chan and Tsunade-sama had entered the hot springs. They immediately noticed and proceeded to beat both of them within an inch of their life. He shuddered at the memory. Neither of them are in the village this time, what's there to lose? It's not like I'm doing anything important, thought Minato. Besides, it'll be worth it if I can learn how to beat this blasted paperwork. Alright, I'll do it, but if we get caught I'm flashing away. This was why Jiraiya loved peeking with Minato. Once he mastered the Hiraishin there was no way he could get caught. Without you. At those last words Jiraiya's face faltered, that cheeky brat. Fine, fine. To the hot springs, announced Jiraiya. With a crash he broke through one of the windows leaving an amused Minato in his wake. There's no one else in world quite like Sensei, thought Minato with a smile. He quickly flashed away to the marker he ever so discreetly had hidden within the hot springs to wait for his super pervert of a sensei. Yamanaka Flower Shop. Ino's day was going as perfect as possible. She made a bunch of new friends and even found a really cute boy in her class. Even though Naruto Baka was annoying, she still considered him a new friend and was even plotting on using him to try to get Sasuke's attention. She had just arrived at her family's flower shop filled with happy thoughts. With a hum she skipped inside and left her butterfly bag behind the counter. Sending a quick greeting to her mom, she began tending to the flowers. The Yamanakas had owned this little flower shop for nigh on 4 generations. The Shodai Hokage would even come by to pick up his flowers here. He loved watching all the life that was present in the one little shop. Sometimes even going so far as to spend an entire day surrounded by the only friend he knew would never betray him, Mother Nature. He even gifted them a special garden just inside their clan compound, where they could pick their flowers. The flowers in this garden were never affected by seasons and always grew back the next morning after they were picked. It was the ultimate present, one they treasured to this day. For this reason everyone came to the Yamanaka flower shop to receive all their orders. You could always find the type of flower you wanted no matter what the season. They were also some of the most gifted flower arrangers within Hai no Kuni. Almost like they were born to it. Ino was currently tending to the jasmines, her favorite flower. They represented grace and elegance, which Ino always believed was how every princess should carry herself. Quietly humming to herself as she delighted in smelling and spraying every single flower. As she walked past the flowers, they seemed to come to life. Standing a little bit taller, the colors more vibrant. Some were even growing at an alarming rate. Her mother was quietly reading behind the counter watching her daughter tend to the flowers when all of a sudden it seemed as though the flowers themselves had come to life. She had never seen anything like it. The only time she had ever heard of something like this was from her mother. She used to tell her stories of her great-great-grandfather. The Shodai would spend hours talking about the wonders of watching him create new life from chakra. Could it be that there was a new Senju heir? She had long before hidden her heritage. After her parents were killed in the Second Shinobi War, she decided it would be better to drop her last name and marry into an established clan. She would have to wait to speak to her husband when he got back from his council meeting. He was the only one who knew the truth behind her heritage. Maybe even her great-aunt, Tsunade, would return. Who knew? After all, she said she had no family worth staying for. Maybe Ino was the spark that revived the flame of her will. Outside the civilian academy, Naruto's first day of school was not going how he expected. First, all the girls were fawning over Sasuke Teme. Then, all their instructor did was lecture them about the importance of having a strong foundation of reading and writing and math. When are you ever going to use math as a ninja? That was Naruto's thinking anyway. The worst part came when he was eating lunch. At first it was just him, Sasuke, Shikamaru and Choji. All of a sudden Ino and Sakura, he finally found out the pink-haired girl's name, joined in and brought over the weird guy with the red marks on his face, Kiba, and the weird girl with the white eyes, Hinata. They started off quiet with the girls, sans Hinata, trying to get Sasuke's attention. Afterwards, they started to work the conversation toward their clans, which Naruto found the most interesting since almost everyone there was from a clan except Sakura. That was when he found out that they had all already accessed their chakra and were getting special clan training. Special training. Naruto wasn't even allowed to play outside without any supervision. This ruined the rest of Naruto's day, especially since he had been asking his uncle to train him ever since he found out he was the strongest ninja in the village. Now he was sitting outside, impatiently waiting for his uncle to come pick him up. He'd been waiting for around half an hour, but he still hadn't arrived. The more he sat there, the angrier he got about the fact that kids his age already started top it off. Whenever the parents of other villager kids arrived, they would look at him with disgust and turn their kids away. Naruto couldn't get the whispers of, "Stay away from him," or the slight mutterings of, "Demon child," out of his head. He just wished he knew why the villagers treated him so poorly. He hadn't done anything wrong, not that he knew of anyway. After another 5 minutes he realized his uncle probably got caught up with Hokage duties, so he grabbed his froggy backpack and started down the street towards the Hokage mansion. He was keeping to himself as he realized that there weren't very many people around him, and he was receiving glares from everyone as he walked past, even more so now that his uncle or his Ni-san weren't there to walk with him. The villagers wouldn't dare to hurt him, but they could shun him and keep him away from their businesses when the Hokage and his watchdogs weren't present. The longer he walked, the more frightened he became, slowly starting to pick up his pace to get home quicker. As the crowd got larger and larger, and the muttering grew louder and louder, Naruto began sprinting his way out of the third sector and made his way past the gate, glad to have escaped the large crowd of people. Just as he rounded the corner, he ran face first into a large man sporting a series of white dreadlocks that ran down to his back. He stood around 5 inches 11 and wore a strange hitate that Naruto had never seen before. The man shrugged off the blow and took a closer look at the boy. Noticing his red hair, he realized he must be an Uzumaki. Didn't the Sandaime order the capture of an Uzumaki some years ago? Thought the strange man. It couldn't hurt to. His thoughts interrupted when the boy spoke. "Hey, watch where you're going, you could get someone hurt," said the young Uzumaki, sending a weak glare at the man, quickly forgetting about the villagers. The man chuckled to himself before speaking. "Why don't you watch where you're going? You ran into me, Shrimpy," said the white-haired man with a flick to the boy's forehead. Naruto clutched at his forehead, annoyed that the stranger had hit him, and was about to challenge him until he looked up at his forehead and realized the man must be a shinobi. With a squint of his eyes, he tried to decipher the strange man's headband. The white-haired man noticed the young boy trying to concentrate and decipher his forehead protector, enjoying the look of concentration on his face. Deciding to save the boy the trouble, he spoke. "It's from Kumo Kid, the village hidden in the clouds." Slowly taking in the information, Naruto started to think back to where he heard Kumo a few seconds. A light bulb went off in his mind. "You met with my uncle today," shouted Naruto with a look of pride. The Kumo nin was taken aback. He didn't realize that the yellow flash had a nephew, especially an Uzumaki nephew. That was new information to take home. The thought of nabbing an extra paycheck, he began formulating a plan. Sure, his mission was to just steal the Hyuga heiress, but if he could get out of here with the Hyuga and the Uzumaki, it would be a greater boon to their village. Hell, he might even get paid triple for this. "Yeah, I did, kid, he's a pretty cool guy," started off the plotting shinobi. "But, hey listen kid, your uncle gave me permission to walk around the village and I'm having some trouble getting around. Would you mind showing me around? I heard there are some pretty cool clan compounds around here." Thinking hard about, Naruto made a face. His uncle had warned him about going to places with strangers, but then again this man did just have a meeting with his uncle, and he was still mad at him for not picking him up. Besides, maybe he'll get to see one of his new friends. Thankfully for him, his uncle made sure he knew how to get to all the major clan houses and where they were located. When it came to learning about the village, Naruto would absorb the knowledge like a sponge, but his mind would wander off if you ever started talking about boring stuff like math. Having made his decision, Naruto looked up at the man and said, "Yeah sure, it's this way, follow me," not noticing the gleam in the man's eye. Council room. After returning from the council room, Minato's day got progressively better. Once Jiraiya had arrived at the hot springs, Minato demanded that he get his payment before they started researching. With a smirk, Jiraiya made a cross shape with 2 fingers on each hand, creating a Kage Bunshin, shadow clone. Minato's eyes widened at the realization of what his sensei had just done. Shadow clones were normally used for scouting and reconnaissance. They returned their experiences to the user of the technique, allowing for an instant transmission of information through their experience. Some shinobi of higher caliber mentally train themselves using clones, while training their body at the same time. Using a clone cannot increase physical strength, however, by doing a series of exercise, such as taijutsu katas, fighting techniques and forms, they can retain the muscle memory and transfer it over to the original user of the jutsu. This can serve her to perfect the style, but the user of the technique would still have to physically train their body in order to increase their strength and speed with the style. The only downside to the technique is that it requires a lot of chakra from the user, as they're essentially splitting their reserves into multiple bodies. By using a shadow clone to do his paperwork, Minato could enjoy himself with his guilty pleasures, while his clones did all the work and he retained the knowledge of the papers that had to be signed. Who knew such a simple trick like the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow close technique, would alleviate the amount of work he actually had to do. With his new revelations, he sent a shadow clone to take his place in the office and work on the paperwork, essentially acting as a figurehead. Meanwhile, Minato spent the whole day with his pervy sensei peeping on women and helping him with new ideas for his books. He was so giddy with excitement he lost track of time and forgot that he had to pick up Naruto form school. Unfortunately, his day met an abrupt end when he was called into the council room to discuss the proposal of an alliance with Kumo, and that is where he found himself now. The council members had been going back and forth debating the pros and cons of accepting and declining the proposal. Half of the council said yes, the other half said no. They were in a stalemate, but nobody was agreeing with each other on their reasons for accepting or declining. Just as the deliberation was reaching its climax, Minato felt a tug on the back of his mind. It seemed to be coming from the barrier. Completely focusing on the barrier, he began to collect nature chakra in his chair, activating his connection to the barrier and searching for the disturbance. Within seconds of looking, he sensed a disturbance in Sector 2 just on the outskirts of the village. The Kumo nin he had a meeting with was running towards the outer wall. It seemed as if he was attempting to leave the village, but why? Taking a closer look, he sensed two more chakra sources with the Kumo nin. One very small source and the other relatively large. Upon sensing these chakras, he immediately identified one as Naruto's. He just now realized he had Lefty Boy alone without any supervision. Opening his eyes, he immediately flashed to the Hiraishin marker he had placed on Naruto's clothes, to the surprise of various council members. Arriving just in front of the Kumo nin, he noticed he had both children slung across his back in separate bags. With a look of surprise on his face, the Kumo nin slowed before throwing out a volley of kunai and shuriken, attempting to distract the young Kage. Minato quickly sidestepped the volley of knives and responded with his own tri-pronged kunai, dropping one on the floor and throwing the other two. The first he threw was towards the bag on the man's back, the second was slightly delayed and angled towards the man's chest. Within seconds the battle was over. As the Kumo nin attempted to dodge the first kunai, all he saw was a flash of yellow and was parted from his package. Two more flashes later, the man lay dead at the Hokage's feet. In the time it took the man to dodge the second kunai, Minato had flashed forward, taken the children, flashed backwards to safety, and once again flashed forward to the third and final kunai, ending the man's life with a quick clean cut to the jugular. This was the power of Konoha's Yondaime Hokage. Taking both kids in his arms, he flashed back to the council room, placing them both in the corner of the council room. Ignoring the wide-eyed stares of his associates, he flashed back to the body of the Kumo nin, taking it with him on his final trip and depositing it on the council chamber's floor. From start to finish it had taken less than a minute. The council members in the room shuffled through a medley of emotions. Initially they were shocked, then they were confused, and finally they were angry as they realized what had just occurred. Their voices gaining volume as they called for more Kumo blood. The elders sat quietly watching the young Kage and reading his reaction. Of the council members, none voiced his anger more than one Hiyashi Hyuga, but even his anger paled in comparison to that of the Yondaime. The aura that he emitted was terrifying, and the small, concentrated amounts of killing intent that were being released were enough to make even the most seasoned Junin freeze. With a single raise of the hand, he silenced the council chambers. The Sandaime took this opportunity to speak. Minato, you understand that the Raikage will demand reparations for what has occurred here tonight. Killing one of his shinobi that we granted immunity to during his visit will not be taken lightly. At the very least they will be demanding a pair of Hyuga eyes, as we can see that was their intent with the capture of young Hinata. Upon hearing his words, Minato turned to look at the aged Sarutobi. With a cold edge to his voice, he spoke. They will receive what they deserve. Grabbing a scroll from his pack, He turned towards the body and with a quick swipe of his kunai severed the head from the torso. He then proceeded to seal the head within the scroll. Motioning towards two of the Anbu guards in the shadows, he said, "Burn the body, get a box for this scroll. Make sure to mail it to the Reikage of Kumo. Send my regards." 3 years later, as the years went on, Konoha continued to prosper. The young shinobi coming out of the academy were more prepared for the outside world and better equipped to deal with them thanks to the new reform. As their shinobi continued to grow, so did their power. During this time, Minato saw the need to begin training Naruto to avoid another incident, like with the Hyuga, in the shinobi arts. He focused mainly on the boy's chakra control and bukajutsu, weapon techniques, figuring that with the boy's growing chakra reserves, because of his tenet, he would have greater need for control. Aside from these exercises, the Yondaime also gave Naruto some scrolls with the katas, forms, for Minato's own fighting style, leaving it up to the boy to learn on his own, as he did all those years ago. Tsunade had also, officially, returned to the village after her self-imposed exodus. Since then, the medical program was at its all-time best, leading the known world in medical care. The day Jiraiya arrived with her in tow was a much celebrated day. Although the details behind her return were unclear, it was certain that her return meant great tidings for Konohagakure. Her return was highlighted with the return of the Uzumaki clan. With his forces back to power, the Yondaime began launching a series of campaigns against the traitor Sannin, Orochimaru. During one of the raids, Konoha shinobi were able to retrieve 3 members of the former illustrious clan. Uzumaki Hinoka, an 18-year-old girl with fiery red hair and a calm demeanor. She was trained by her parents as a traditional Uzumaki seal master, which Orochimaru took advantage of and was in the process of using her to create the ultimate summoning contract. Uzumaki Karen, a 9-year-old girl who had remarkable chakra with healing properties as well as having sensory capabilities. She was being used as a spy within Kusagakure as well as an apprentice researcher. Uzumaki Tayuya, a 9-year-old girl being trained as one of Orochimaru's elite guard. A genjutsu prodigy with a foul mouth, having been taken in by Orochimaru off the streets, Orochimaru was almost like a savior to her. Over time, the 2 younger girls were integrated within the Konoha culture. Having been given an escort and admission to their ninja academy, the girls quickly realized that what they were given was a mercy compared to what they endured with Orochimaru. The oldest of the 3, grateful for her rescue, was given the rank of Chunin for her cooperation. Of course, this was under the condition that she teach in the ninja academy, thus making fuinjutsu, sealing techniques, part of the academy curriculum. Unfortunately, with the recovery of the 3 Uzumaki women, some members on the council, Danzo and the Fugaku, saw this as an opportunity to begin a breeding program, effective immediately since these women, in their eyes, could not be trusted. By creating this breeding program, they could intermix the Uzumaki females with some of the more powerful clans, merging the bloodlines with the Uzumaki vitality that allowed them such large chakra pools. This was immediately put to an end when the Yondaime immediately intervened, shutting down the operation before it had even begun. After the Hyuga incident, nobody dared go against the Yondaime's wishes, especially after seeing the vicious side he carried with him. Begrudgingly, those particular council members backed off the breeding program, for now, and allowed the girls to inhabit the Uzumaki clan house near the Hokage mansion. This was their sort of test to prove their heritage, as only Uzumaki blood could open the sealed gates to enter the compound. Thankfully, all 3 passed this test, but their council seat would be put on hold until one of them reached Junin status within the village. No one was more excited than Naruto, since he now had 3 more people to add to his family. With good also came bad. Relations with Kumo were strained ever since the Hyuga incident. Kumo's borders were closed to all Konoha nin, and all Kumo nin operating within Hai no Kuni had a kill-on-sight order issued by the Hokage. The Reikage, had personally sent his response to Minato immediately after the package was delivered. That was one of the scariest days post-Kyuubi for many civilians and ninja alike. Outside the gates of Konoha stood the second fastest man in the world. Arms crossed with his bleach blonde hair combed back, he stood around 6 feet 6 with a hulking physique. He wore his cage haori over nothing, revealing his chiseled chest, and had his cage hat on which was emblazoned with the kanji for lightning. Within milliseconds of his arrival, the Yondaime flashed to the front of the gates, staring down his fellow Kage. In the moments that followed, the amount of chakra released bore down enough pressure to make the most elite Junins falter. The killing intent that followed had many of them keeling over, nauseated by the sheer willpower exuded by the two men. No words were exchanged during this meeting, only glares, but the message was clear. War was on the horizon. With a smirk, the Raikage turned and slowly walked away, having delivered his message, leaving his colleague to glare at his back until he was out of sight. This was a minor issue compared to what was occurring within the village itself. Apparently Fugaku had generated enough hatred and scorn for the village amongst his fellow Uchiha that they were currently planning a coup d'état against Minato and the village. If it weren't for his two best spies, Itachi and Shisui, he would have never found out that Danzo was involved as well. Triple agents by design, they successfully infiltrated Root, and he now had eyes and ears within the Uchiha contingent. He was hoping to deal with Fugaku personally, possibly giving him and his clan member a more luxurious position in order to appease the clan. He really did not want to lose another of the founding clans of this village. Undisclosed location. It was darker than usual, colder too. Two lights were illuminating 5 figures seated in the lotus position at the head of the room. This wasn't the first time Uchiha Itachi had been in this room before. Over the last 7 years, Itachi and his best friend Shisui were acting as spies within the Uchiha clan. A week after the Kyuubi attack, they were both handed over to Danzo, where they were gruesomely trained in the shinobi. To their prodigious natures, they quickly rose through the ranks. They were Uchiha members by day, Root by night. This was how they progressed so quickly through the ranks. Before the Yondaime could implement his new schooling reform, Itachi and Shisui had already made Chunin, making Jonin by 10 and currently Anbu captain at 13. With their advancements, Danzo continued to get his clutches deeper and deeper into Konoha's infrastructure, hoping to one day have one of his Root soldiers as acting Anbu commander. Months after their initial contact with Danzo, Fugaku began formulating his plan. Keeping both Itachi and Shisui in the loop, explaining to them the reason they were being so gruesomely trained by Danzo and his elite shinobi. Fugaku believed that Danzo had no idea what he was planning to do, and so confided all of his plans into the boys, making sure they understood the importance of their roles to the clan. Neither of them agreed to this atrocity, but they kept quiet and instantly went to their Hokage, explaining everything to him, even the involvement of Danzo. At first Minato was furious at their actions, but the rational side of his mind took over before he could do something rash. He could use this to take out 2 targets at once. Cut off the figurehead of the rebellion in Fugaku, and get rid of the second most dangerous man in Konoha, Danzo. First, though, he needed more information before he could take them down. He had chosen to play them both and pit them against each other while pitting them against himself. He purposefully told the boys to reveal their father's plot to Danzo. Danzo then came to the elders, the current and former Hokages, with new information regarding a possible coup against the Leaf. Thus, this is where they now stood, giving their report of the month's findings to their superiors. With a stoic look, Itachi began his report. The Uchiha clan planned to strike on the anniversary of the Kyuubi's attack 2 weeks from now. It is my belief that not everyone is fully committed to the cause, but are being coerced by the ringleaders, Uchiha Setsuna, Uchiha Tekka, Uchiha Anabi, Uchiha Yashira, Uchiha Yakumi, and my father Uchiha Fugaku. The elders took a moment to absorb all this information. It seemed that they had very little time to react properly. The first to speak was Danzo. The solution is simple. We end the Uchiha clan before the rebellion begins, he began. If we do nothing and a civil war begins, Kumo will invade and all will be lost. It is not wise to leave such a threat within our village. Looking over at the members sitting next to him, he saw impassive looks from 2 of his 3 former teammates and the Hokage. The last one had a look of disgust on his face. You and your ideal disgust me, Danzo. Did Kagami's sacrifice mean nothing to you? Do you have no love for the innocents? Danzo turned to address the former Kage. Nothing comes before the village, our sensei taught us that. We must end any threat to our village with whatever means necessary, no matter how hard the decision may be for a weak-willed man like you. The room became silent once more, everyone mulling over the ramifications of the mass murder of an entire shinobi clan. Hiruzen was afraid that Minato would succumb to the will of his former teammates, His suspicions confirmed when he heard his successor speak. Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Shisui. You are being assigned an S-rank mission. Under no circumstances are you to divulge the parameters of your mission. Do you understand? Both boys nodded their heads. You will eliminate the Uchiha threat, leave no one alive. Hokage Tower. Minato sat on his chair, currently staring out the window at the village. The sun was setting. This was one of the pleasures of having the best view in the village, watching the colors of the sun as they lit the village. Each color seemed to play off the glass of the surrounding building, giving the village an all-to-perfect sheen. As he enjoyed the sight, two blurs appeared behind, both kneeling as they respectfully acknowledged him. Minato slowly turned, taking in the appearances of the newcomers, Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Shisui, his look distant as if lost in thought. They waited in silence for a few minutes before Shisui's curiosity got the better of him. Looking up, he said, "Hokage-sama," he started somewhat hesitantly, "what exactly did you call us for?" He was the more outspoken of the two. No amount of Anbu training would beat that out of him. Minato turned his full attention onto the boys kneeling before him. Yes, his plan would work out flawlessly. He motioned for them to stand. "I've called you both to tell you I have officially cancelled your mission," he said, quietly gauging the reactions of the boys. There was none. "I see you're not surprised," continued Minato. "Care to explain why?" Seeing the opportunity to speak, Shisui immediately began. "It made no sense that you would order us to massacre the entire clan. As our report stated, some members are only interested in coexisting within the village," he said firmly. "You as a strong-willed, intelligent man, would not bow down to the whims of the elders so easily if there were an easier solution," he finished, satisfied with his answer. Minato turned to Itachi. "Do you feel the same way?" Itachi's cold, calculative face gave nothing away. "Hi, Hokage-sama," began Itachi. "With Danzo-sama present, there was no way for you to give us your true orders. The best course of action would be to take out the ringleaders that are generating the anti-Konoha propaganda and cutting off the snake's head. However, because of how long we have taken to act, any grievance against the Uchiha clan can rapidly spark up the rebellion and we shall have war once more." Minato smirked at his response. Itachi was a true prodigy. Everything in the meeting was going as planned. Now came the real test of these boys' skills. "Now that you both understand the fire that we're playing with here, I will give you your true mission. You will divulge this information to no one under the penalty of death. Do you understand?" Both young men nodded their heads. "The time is nigh to use all the information you have both been gathering for me on both the Uchiha clan and Anbu route. You will assassinate the Anbu route commander, Shimura Danzo, at the same time dismantling their headquarters. Danzo has been a thorn in this village's side for far too long. It is time to take him out of the equation," explained Minato, pausing once again to gauge their reactions. Both boys stood stoically awaiting the rest of their Hokage's orders. "I have also received word from Jiraiya, informing me of a new mercenary group based in Omegakure, the village hidden in the rain, called Akatsuki. Quote, once you have eliminated Danzo, you will kill all of the ringleaders of the Uchiha coup, making sure there is no trace of Konoha involvement. You will be marked as a rank missing nin in our bingo books and you shall infiltrate this mercenary group. According to Jiraiya, they dress in black cloaks adorned with red clouds. Take whatever means necessary to get the leader's acceptance. Relay all information to myself, or the Sandame, whom I've already made aware of our plan," finished Minato. Once Minato had finished, he proceeded to take in the boys' demeanor. There was an air of acceptance that he had perceived earlier in the day when he had assigned their mission. Their response was immediate. "Hi, Hokage-sama." Hiding his victorious smirk, Minato kept his cold facade. "Your mission begins tonight at midnight. Outskirts of Konoha." As night fell across the village, two blurs could be seen dashing towards the forest line, stopping right where the barrier stopped and encircled the entire village. They stood there waiting for several minutes before a swirl appeared on the opposite side of the barrier. The man before them wore an unadorned black cloak, and had an orange swirl mask on his face. In the dark light, most shinobi would not notice the gleaming red eye hidden within the mask, but these two were not like most shinobi. Uchiha Madara, the man who attacked Konoha 7 years prior and killed Uzumaki Kushina. So this is the leader of Akatsuki, thought Itachi. Immediately after their meeting with their Hokage, they sent word to Akatsuki of their defection, Through some of Jiraiya's spies they managed to weave the information through the grapevine and attract their attention. A paper bird was all that responded, the coordinates to this location printed on the paper. Now standing here looking at the man they knew their Hokage despised, they began to have some doubts that they'd be able to complete this mission. No one lied to Uchiha Madara and survived. Madara was along the same thoughts. He was unsure what to think when he got the message of not one, but two Uchiha defectors. He came here to confirm their story and ensure that they passed his judgment. 2 extra pairs of Sharingan would make capturing the 9 Biju a lot easier when they have their full strength. And they would make great replacements should he ever need them. Both parties seemed to stand there for what seemed like an eternity, taking stock of each other, attempting to find a weakness to exploit. None was found, yet. Madara spoke. Let's make this clear, I do not trust you. You do not trust me. You know who I am and what I am capable of, yet I know little of the two of you. Therefore tonight you will prove your loyalty to me. Tonight we kill your Hokage. Root headquarters. Today was the day Danzo collected his prize. In his own eyes, Danzo was his sensei's perfect student, embodying the will of fire while sacrificing anything for the sake of the village. He believed his pragmatism and his fanatic love for the village's well-being no matter the cost were the ideals the Nidaime left behind for his Nidaime's oppression to the Uchiha had rubbed off on his young student and showed greatly when he petitioned for the death of the entire clan. It wasn't as if he hated them. No, he envied the gifts they were blessed with, but they did not have the village's best interest in mind. As such those eyes deserved to belong to someone who did. Hiruzen, it seemed, took more after the Shodai. While powerful, he let his kind heart rule his actions. He could not, would not, take the necessary actions to protect the village. The Yondaime was showing signs of a man who knew how to rule, yet Danzo couldn't help question his motives towards the Kyuubi boy. It seemed his interest was not in the best for this village. Danzo would not allow this to happen. For without dark there was no light, and without roots there would be the roots that supported this great village. Regardless of the sacrifice, even if it meant the lives of innocents. At one point in time Danzo may have been considered handsome, now however he was a veteran of time. He had shaggy black hair, with a criss-cross scar across his chin. His right eye was covered by a series of white bandages that wrapped around his head, as was his right arm. He wore a white haori over nothing, tied with a white obi. And wore a pair of black shinobi sandals. He was currently walking through the corridors of Root, his cane lightly tapping the concrete floors of his headquarters. Having the base located just outside the Yondaime's barrier and buried about 30 feet underground, his headquarters were nigh impenetrable. Only full-fledged members of Root knew the entrance to the facility. These agents carried a seal that would not allow them to speak of Root or of Danzo without killing them. He felt safe within his sanctuary, but he always kept 2 guards with him no matter where he went. Today the duty fell to 2 of his regulars, Yamanaka Fu and Aburame Torun. They were his 3rd and 4th ranked Root members. Fu had a knack with mind possession traps and was gifted with interrogation tactics, like most Yamanakas. Torun held within him a very special, nano-sized Kakaichu beetle, which was extremely poisonous. These insects could be spread by a simple touch and were pivotal to his fighting style. On this night, those abilities were a non-factor. Danzo felt a chill in the air as he walked into a spacious room with 4 wooden bridges connecting to a central concrete landing. The chill proceeded down his spine, every nerve in his body screaming danger. His body visibly tensed, but he kept calm, his eyes immediately on alert. You didn't live to be 56 years old without extreme caution and awareness of your surroundings. Out of the shadows in the corridor before him strolled 2 figures, their faces still masked by darkness. Fu and Torun instantly readied themselves for battle. Danzo's eyes narrowed, who had found them and how? As the 2 figures walked out of the shadows Danzo immediately recognized them. His prodigies Shisui and Itachi. He visibly relaxed. These 2 were the epitome of the Root program. The perfect soldiers. With the appearance of both Root shinobi, having verified their identities, Fu and Torun moved backwards, waiting in the shadows as per protocol. Itachi, Shisui, he said, acknowledging them as they knelt before their master. Danzo-sama, they replied in unison. Rise, spoke Danzo. How go the preparations, he continued. I trust everything is ready for tonight. Hi, Danzo-sama, they replied in unison. Satisfied with this answer, Danzo turned, motioning for his guards to follow, ready to retire for the night. Turning, what he found was far from what he expected. The bodies of both Fu and Torun sprawled before him, taken out with a single cut. Shock marred his normally impassive features. He turned just in time to see both Itachi and Shisui vanish in a flock of crows. Genjutsu, illusionary technique. The Shisui appeared behind Danzo, Tonto on his neck. "My apologies, Danzo-sama," his voice emotionless. With a quick cut, he severed his head from his body, letting the body fall to the floor with an audible thud. Turning towards Itachi, he nodded curtly, taking this moment to clean his blood-stained blade. He did not notice the body of Danzo vanish, but Itachi did. "Shisui!" he shouted, too late. Danzo reappeared behind him, plunging his blade deep into the heart of Shisui, the blade sticking out from the opposite side. His eyes full of surprise as he looked down at the protruding blade. Looking back up at Itachi, with a ghost of a smile etched on his face as the light left his eyes. Seconds turned into horse as Itachi watched Danzo pull the blade out from Shisui's back, his lifeblood spilling on the concrete floor. Itachi's shocked expression enough to momentarily satisfy Danzo. Regardless of all the emotional conditioning, nothing compared to the pain of losing your most precious person. In that moment, Itachi shouted in agony, both at the pain of his loss and at the sudden pain in his eyes, as chakra surged towards his Sharingan. Gouts of black flame seared everything in front of him. When the pain finally subsided, he looked up once again, seeing the charred remains of his best friend. Checking his surroundings for Danzo, he saw a second pile of ash, but knew it was not him. He saw him use the Kawarimi no Jutsu, substitution technique, just before the flames reached him. Standing, he felt a new surge of strength. Everything he saw was clearer. The dark seemed to recede just a bit more, giving him better visibility, and his ability to see the chakra around him seemed to increase tenfold. This was the power his friend bestowed upon him before dying, and he would use it to avenge him and fulfill their mission. What were those black flames? The name of the technique subconsciously appeared in his mind. Amaterasu, heavenly illumination. From the shadows, Danzo looked down in amazement, taking in Itachi's new eyes, noticing their pinwheel design. So this is the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan, kaleidoscope eye, thought Danzo. I need to make sure to not damage his eyes in this fight. I'll be needing a replacement soon. I won't be able to take this boy lightly. He began taking off the bandages around his eye, revealing a dead, white eye and severe scarring tissue around his face. Unraveling the bandages on his arm, he revealed a pale, ivory-colored arm, seemingly reattached to his torso as the tone did not match the rest of his tan body. A face protruding from his shoulder. During this entire process, Itachi had located Danzo. He was currently focusing on what he was planning, first taking in the dead white eye and his right socket. His chakra pathways seemed to pump more chakra into his right eye than his left, somewhat similar to that of a dujutsu, eye technique, user. Taking a closer look, his right eye pathways looked similar to that of Kakashi, a permanently active dujutsu, but which dujutsu was it? Recognizing that it was an implanted eye, he began to replay the information of the last couple of minutes through his head. The moment as Danzo disappeared after Shisui's killing blow forever seared into his mind. That disappearance. It was almost as if he had rewritten fate somehow. The only technique possible of doing that was the ultimate Uchiha Genjutsu, granting the power to change one's fate at the cost of an eye. Izanagi. Itachi continued to watch without revealing any emotions. Inside, he was seething. The man who killed his best friend had stolen an eye from one of his clansmen. It was one thing to have it gifted to you, as with Kakashi Taiko, another to steal the eye and use it so carelessly, without any regard. He used it as if it were replaceable. Reaching this conclusion, he watched as Danzo unwrapped his arm, revealing the pale white skin beneath the bandages. It almost seemed dead, but Itachi recognized the chakra that was being emitted from the arm alone. It was similar to a former Root member codenamed Yamato. Theo Nly boy of 60 to survive the transplant of the Shodai's genes. This would be an interesting fight. Upon further inspecting, Itachi realized that the arm seemed incomplete. The arm was riddled with what seemed like holes, and they were all empty save the one on his palm. This one had a red orb with 3 tomos ringed around a central black orb. Recognizing the orb in the palm of Danzo's implanted arm, Itachi let a scowl mar his face. It was second time he had showed any true emotion since becoming Anbu, the first having happened minutes ago when Shisui was killed. This man would pay for his transgressions against his clan. Recognizing that Danzo had finished, Itachi had pulled back his sleeves just enough to show seals on his wrists. Placing his hands to his wrists, he began unsealing shuriken from his seals and throwing them with precision towards Danzo. In the span of seconds 4 waves of shuriken had been launched. With each wave containing 5 shuriken, Itachi began forming the hand seals for one of the Sandame's most revered techniques. Ram right pointing arrow, rat right pointing arrow, bird right pointing arrow, boar right pointing arrow, tiger. Ninpo. Cage shuriken bunshin no jutsu, shuriken shadow clone technique. In an instant the 5 shuriken multiplied into 20 in each wave, totaling around 100 shuriken arriving within milliseconds of each other at intercepting intervals. Having finished the hand seals for he began a new set. Snake right pointing arrow, ram right pointing arrow, monkey right pointing arrow, boar right pointing arrow, horse right pointing arrow, tiger. Kaden. Gokakyu no jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique. A large fireball setting the kunai alight and increased their potency just as they reached Danzo. Itachi watched as Danzo Kawarami just in front of him with a plank rapidly going through a set of seals. Rat right pointing arrow, rabbit right pointing arrow, dog. Futon. Shinkagyoku, wind release, vacuum wind bullets. Having tracked the wind bullets, Itachi allowed them to hit him as he disappeared in a murder of crows, reappearing behind Danzo just as he released the genjutsu. It was too late, Itachi spoke as he plunged his tanto deep into Danzo's heart. There is nothing these eyes can't see, and they see your death. Itachi watched as Danzo's body disappeared as it had earlier and reappeared in front of him once more. With a quick glance he watched as the eye on the palm of his hand closed. Realizing his ultimate defense was gone, Itachi began to pick up the pace of the fight, immediately flying into a new series of hand seals. Rat right pointing arrow, tiger right pointing arrow, dog right pointing arrow, ox right pointing arrow, rabbit right pointing arrow, tiger. Kaden. Hosenka no jutsu, fire release, phoenix sage fire technique. A series of fire bullets were emitted from his mouth flying towards Danzo from different directions. He chained this technique with the one he had just copied from Danzo. Futon. Shinkagyoku. The wind bullets impacting the fire bullets, enlarging them and increasing the intensity of the flames. He watched as Danzo stood still and began flying through his own hand seals, eyeing the increasing chakra coming from his transplanted arm. Rat right pointing arrow, dog right pointing arrow, tiger. Mokuton. Mokujoheki, wood release, wood locking wall. His question answered, a series of wooden beams created a half-dome shield around Danzo's body, blocking the incoming fireballs. Itachi immediately rushed forward in a burst of speed, but when he arrived Danzo was nowhere to be found. Turning he found Danzo begin the seals for his summoning technique. Kachiyose no jutsu. In a poof of smoke, a large mammoth-like creature appeared and began sucking in all the air in the surrounding area. Itachi attempted to root himself to the ground, but found it ineffective. As he struggled on the ground, Danzo went on the offensive. Using the wind created by Baku's suction technique, he jumped behind and to the side of Itachi, just outside of Baku's range. Kaden. Goryuka no jutsu, fire release, great dragon fire technique. With the wind amplifying the flames, there was no way Itachi would be able to counter in time without taking out the summoned creature. With his hands momentarily useless, he only had his eyes. Eyes glowing, he thought. Amaterasu. Within seconds the beast's suction stopped. But the flaming dragon behind him was still present and he was seconds away from being burned to a crisp. With no time to Kawarimi away, Itachi turned, his eyes glowing once more. This time a new technique seemed to spring to his mind as he thought. Susanoo, tempestuous god of valor. A glowing red rib cage appeared, shielding Itachi from the flames. He instantly felt a drain on his reserves. He was currently around half. He needed to end this fight now. The glowing rib cage disappeared, revealing a shocked Danzo. Taking this opportunity to get in close, Itachi rushed forward, engaging Danzo in taijutsu. The interceptor style of the Uchiha clan worked better as a counter to other techniques using the Sharingan to predict their movements and counter, but Itachi knew where his weakness was. In his old age, Danzo had slowed down considerably, making him more vulnerable to Itachi's speed. Coming in with a high kick that Danzo blocked, Itachi began a flurry of punches aimed for Danzo's torso, forcing the older man to block or take blacking blows that he could ill afford. With every block, Itachi found new openings to take advantage of in Danzo's defense. He began to pick him apart with subtle blows laced with chakra. All the while he released a steady stream of his own chakra into the air, beginning to weave his genjutsu. Up to this point, Danzo had yet to look into Itachi's eyes, having fought various Uchiha before he knew that one look and this fight was over. Yet it was becoming increasingly difficult for Danzo to keep up with the younger boy in hand-to-hand combat. However, Danzo noticed the boy got over-aggressive when taking openings in Danzo's guard. In his inexperience and haste to end the fight, he had left himself wide open for Danzo's counter. As an overextended arm made his way towards Danzo's head, he grabbed it, holding it firm as he unsealed his cane sword with his other hand. Plunging the sword deep into the boy's chest, he looked up triumphantly as he saw blood seeping from his mouth. Bringing his eyes higher, he registered the shock that appeared in his eyes for all of a second before he smiled. He had looked into his eyes. Disappearing in a murder of crows, Danzo was dragged into a world of red and black. Inside Tsukuyomi, before him stood Itachi sitting on a throne. Looking down at himself, he noticed himself tied to a post. Turning to Itachi, he spoke. "What is this? Where have you taken me?" Standing from his throne, Itachi spoke. "You are now within my Tsukuyomi, Moon Reader. In this world I can create whatever I want, do whatever I want." Walking towards him, he continued. "For the next 72 hours, you will experience the pain of losing every single one of your limbs one by one." Danzo watched as Itachi pulled out his tanto and began cutting off his appendages. The agony was excruciating, it almost seemed real. Danzo had to remind himself he was in a genjutsu. 71 hours 59 minutes to go. Outside Tsukuyomi. In the real world, only 3 seconds had passed as Itachi watched Danzo fall to the ground on one knee. He was still alive after the amount of mental torture he had been put through, but he wouldn't be for long. Grabbing his tanto, he walked up to Danzo. With a stab, he plunged his sword deep into Danzo's chest. Listening to his ragged breathing, he whispered, "For Shisui." Pulling out his sword, he turned, walking away before he heard Danzo speak for the last time. "If this is my end, I'll make sure to end you as well." Pulling back his robes, a series of black seals began to form. Urish Shisho Fuinjutsu. Reverse 4 symbols sealing technique. Itachi's eyes widened as he saw the seals extend from Danzo's body. Quickly using a shunshin, body flicker, he disappeared to a safe distance and watched as a large black orb surrounded Danzo's body, absorbing everything with the diameter of the sphere. With one last look at the devastation behind him, Itachi disappeared in a flicker, getting ready to finish the rest of his objectives. Hokage Tower. Sitting in the dark, gazing out into the village, was one Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage. His arms resting on either side of his chair, clasped together in front of him, his eyebrows creased in though. Itachi and Shisui should have made contact with the leader of Akatsuki and started Danzo's assassination. There was a lot at stake on this mission. He was going to possibly lose 2 of his best operatives, but what he would gain would be much more. A loyal Uchiha clan, less resistance on the council, and 2 spies within a new mercenary organization of S-rank shinobi. Yes, this would all be for the greater good. If I can keep the village safe, then Naruto will be safe as well. He sat back on his chair and grabbed the saucer of sake that he had served on his desk. Tonight was cause for celebration. If only he knew what was coming. Downing the sake in one sip, he began absorbing some of the ambient nature chakra, curious to see if he would sense his 2 operatives as they began their fight. As he extended his senses, a sense of dread came over him, followed immediately by anger. Uchiha Madara had just appeared within his barrier, just on the outskirts of the village. Immediately flashing towards the nearest marker to his location, he appeared before Madara, his anger evident, his killing intent leaking out in enraged intervals. After 7 years he had finally reappeared. This time he would not lose. Standing before him was an unconcerned Uchiha Madara, his posture conveying that of boredom. He looked over to Minato, as if inspecting a fly on the wall. This enraged Minato to no end. "I've waited 7 years to catch a glimpse of you. Not even my best spies could track you down, yet here you are. It feels like Christmas in September. Madara just looked at the Namikaze, with an air of arrogance only the Uchiha had. To think this is Hashirama's legacy. A blonde brat, easily riled by the mere presence of his opponent. Their last fight was what you could call a draw. Minato was able to release the Kyuubi from Madara and injure him enough to back off, but in the process he lost his wife. For Minato, he lost that fight. For Madara, it was a loss. He was forced to back away before he could realize the destruction of the leaf, losing his prosthetic arm in the process and the Kyuubi as well. All because he underestimated the young Kage. That wouldn't happen twice. He wasn't as strong as he once was, but he was strong enough to deal with a nuisance like him. This is for Kushina, Minato said, reaching back and grabbing tri-pronged kunai from his pouch, taking note of Madara's, for lack of a better word, stance. In a blur of motion both men began with their feints. Minato launched kunai after kunai, carefully positioning them as they deflected off every kunai Madara sent his way. In an instant Minato flashed towards Madara's position and they began with taijutsu. For all his speed, it seemed Minato could not land a blow. He came with a roundhouse kick, which after being blocked turned into a leg sweep, which was avoided with a leap. As Madara leapt, Minato had a Rasengan, spiraling sphere, plunging towards his chest. In that instant Madara became intangible, easily avoiding the Rasengan as it went straight through him. Realizing his precarious position, Minato flashed backwards to a marker about 10 yards away, creating a pair of clones before launching into a series of hand seals, one clone doing the same as the clone flashed to a hidden marker in the forest. Tiger right pointing arrow, ox right pointing arrow, dog right pointing arrow, rabbit right pointing arrow, snake. Futon. Daitopa, wind release, great breakthrough. Tiger. Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. A large gust of wind emitted from the palms of the original met with flames as they raced towards Madara's position, fanning them as the heat increased and the technique's range nearly tripled. Madara looked on unimpressed. Normally he would just phase through it, but wanting to prove his superiority he made one seal. Horse. Kaden. Goka Mekyaku, fire release, great fire annihilation. Emitting a powerful wall of fire easily matching the Hokage's combination technique, and overpowering it. In the moment it took him to create the one seal, Minato had already flashed to the marker just behind him, charging up a larger than normal Rasengan. Odama Rasengan, giant spiraling sphere. Seeing the large ball of chakra coming at him, Madara disappeared this time, reappearing just behind Minato, bringing a kunai down towards his lower back. Sensing this, Minato flashed away once again, to a safer marker, staring his opponent down. It seemed he wasn't going to fall for the same trick twice. By countering with a jutsu instead of phasing through, he could easily anticipate Minato's next attack. He would just have to hit him with something he couldn't see coming. Madara turned to look at the Yondaime. It seems he's improved, as to be expected from the leading prodigy of his generation. In that moment, Minato had closes his eyes. What was he planning? Seconds later, he could see orange marks take over his eyes, the mark of a master sage. His pupils turned into horizontal slants, his chakra growing exponentially. Madara watched as he bit a finger and began going through the seals for a summoning technique. Kachiyose no Jutsu. From the smoke appeared two elderly toads, a male and a female. He had summoned the elders of Mount Myoboku. With the appearance of the two elderly sages, Fukusaku and Shima, Minato began explaining the situation, apologizing for bringing them into such a hectic situation. Jumping onto his shoulders, they began to merge with Minato, allowing him the ability to freely fight while they gathered senjutsu, and greatly increasing his potential for combination attacks. The downside to the combined sage mode was that Minato could not rely on the Hiraishin, flying thunder god, and his markers with Fukusaku and Shima merged onto his shoulders. He would have to rely on his natural speed and the Kawazu Kumite, Toad Sage Fist, to win this fight. The Kawazu Kumite allowed him to extend the range of his strikes through the use of natural energy. Engaging Madara once again in taijutsu, he began to gain an upper hand, forcing the masked man to phase through more attacks than he seemed wont to do before. Madara, having faced Hashirama, knew of the extended range senjutsu, sage techniques, allowed the user opting to phase through the attacks as opposed to risking this frail body with a direct or glancing blow from Minato's increased strength. As Minato rained blows down upon the ethereal Madara, Fukasaku and Shima took the opportunity to time each and every phase shift, counting exactly how long he could maintain intangibility before having to become tangible once more. It seemed there was a 1-second interval between each phase shift. They would have to time their techniques perfectly. In this mode they were physically linked to the young sage, feeding him information. Acknowledging the time interval that he had deduced from the last fight, he began formulating his plan. We're going to have to time this combination exactly to be able to land a debilitating blow. While I keep him distracted, I need you both to bring the oil and heat. You tell us when and we'll bridge in the heat, Minato-chan, responded Fukasaku. Smiling upon hearing these words, Minato began charging a sage-powered Rasengan, passing it straight through Madara, coming out the opposite end. Just as the last of his body finished passing through, he ordered. Now, Fukasaku and Shima had already been speeding through their seals. Kaden. Gamayu Enden, fire release, toad oil flame bullet. The flames engulfing Madara as he became tangible. Minato and the elders turned to watch in satisfaction as they landed a direct hit. Their faces bright with shock as they watched their collaboration technique turned back on them. This time when Madara had shifted, he brought something back with him. Realizing that he was currently outclassed in this weakened state, Madara reached into his dimension, grabbing his gunbai and reflecting the collaboration technique through the use of Uchiha-shi, Uchiha reflection. The reflection engulfed the young Kage and he disappeared in a blaze. Uchiha clan compound. It was a quiet night at the clan compound, but while everything seemed normal, there was a tension in the air. Just about every shinobi in the clan knew about the possible coup that was approaching. Their leader, Fugaku, had made a call to arms for all the Uchiha brethren, stating that Konoha blamed them for the Kyuubi attack. It sounded like propaganda to many of them, but most would not dare defy their clan leader. After having established his ringleaders, Fugaku had a hold on most of the younger shinobi, using their arrogance in their own elite status to fuel their rage towards Konoha at such a slight. With all the pieces in place, Fugaku was finally ready to make his move. Itachi and Shisui were his perfect weapons. Always obedient and always spying for him in the Hokage's affairs. If it weren't for that curse seal Danzo had placed on them, he would have known every detail about the root program, but no matter, that was all in due time. Fugaku was currently in his study, taking a look at the battle plans, ensuring that there were no loose ends. That was when he felt a gust of wind behind him. Turning, he was shocked to see Itachi standing there, bloodied blade in hand. "What do you think you are doing, Itachi?" he asked, slightly fearful. He knew his skills, even he was not arrogant enough to think he was Itachi's superior in combat. With a cold, emotionless voice he replied, "Purging the world of scum, Toussaint. Your ringleaders are all dead. Setsuna, Tekka, Anabi, Yashara, Yakumi, all dead by my blade. Their families as well." Any shock that should have shown was masked as Fugaku looked into his eldest son's eyes and realized he never had him on his side. He had always belonged to the village, a traitor to his clan. It seemed Minato Namikaze had bested him once again. "You would put this village trash before your own flesh and blood? You disgust me," he spat. Disappearing in a blur and reappearing directly behind the man he once called father, he spoke. "Arigato Tusama." Those were the last words that Uchiha Fugaku heard before Itachi's blade stabbed him through the heart. In that moment, a bleary-eyed Sasuke had walked into the study, having heard some commotion. "Ni-san?" he said, confused. "What's wrong with Toussaint?" Taking a few minutes to register the blade in Itachi's hand, his eyes widened in shock. "Ni-san, why would you do this?" he shouted. Looking over at his Otuto, he hid the pain that he felt when he saw his betrayed eyes. He was too innocent. "I needed to prove myself, and you foolish brother will be my measuring stick. If you want to kill me, then blame me. Hate me, and live on in shame. Run and run. Cling desperately to life. And then one day come to me bearing these." His eyes shifted into the Mangekyo Sharingan, eyes that I bear now. Tsukuyomi. The world was awash with red and black as they entered Itachi's mind. He made Sasuke relive the death of every Uchiha member he had killed that night. The entire families of the ringleaders slaughtered. No one was worst was watching the death of his father, over and over and over again, and not knowing the true reason why. When the technique finally ended, Sasuke was on the floor unconscious, his Sharingan awakened. Outskirts of Konoha, admiring the work done by his gunbai, Madara shifted his gaze to the tree line waiting for the cage to step out. Once Minato saw the reflection technique, his only alternative was to use his Hiraishin and flash out of the way. With this, both the elders were forced to return to Mount Myoboku. Luckily, he still had his other clone collecting senjutsu from earlier. Stepping out of the forest line, Minato looked over to the devastation wrought by collaboration technique. The crater left behind was large enough to create a new lake. It seemed that it was not only reflected, but also increased in power. Despite the life or death situation, Minato was thrilled by the battle. He hadn't had an opponent this good since he faced off against Kumo's AB combination back in the Third Shinobi War. His anger still present, but he could not allow it to cloud his judgment. Not against an opponent of this magnitude. Madara likewise was enjoying the battle, but while he was enjoying the battle he had to finish this up quickly. He was sure that Minato could sense the Konoha forces arriving and it wouldn't do to have to fight the Sandaime and Tsunade at the same time. There was no doubt in his mind that he could, just not at the level of power he was currently at. He needed more time to collect the Biju, then the world would know the full might of Uchiha Madara. Turning towards the forest, Madara also made out a single chakra signature arriving just on the outskirts. Uchiha Itachi had arrived, and he was alone. It seems like his friend didn't make it through the battle. He must have unlocked his Mangekyo then, thought Madara. Flashback. Before we join you, Madara-sama, we need to get rid of this curse seal placed upon us by Danzo. Finishing, they both opened their mouths, revealing the curse seal Danzo had placed upon their tongue. Very well, I will begin fighting the Hokage as you start your battle. Join me when you finish. If you betray me, you will die. Minato also seemed to take notice of Itachi arriving. He wasn't quite sure what he is doing here. He told him to meet with the Akatsuki leader and leave the village once his missions were complete. In a swirl of leaves, Itachi arrived by Madara's side, his Mangekyo Sharingan flared. It is done, Madara-sama, Shimura Danzo is no more. I am free of his Juinjutsu. Madara's eyes bore into Itachi's. Indeed, it would seem so. Now we must attend to another matter. The Yondaime. Minato gazed at the duo, his face blank, his mind confused. That was until Madara shifted his gaze and Itachi began using the Anbu code. Madara is the leader of Akatsuki. Mission status? Immediately understanding the situation, Minato charged in, giving Itachi his answer. Continue the mission, do not abort. Having dispelled the clone-gathering nature chakra, letting loose a volley of tri-pronged shuriken, he flashed in and began fighting both Uchihas, using his Hiraishin, in combination with the Rasengan and Kawazu Kumite. Both Uchihas were hard-pressed to keep up with the Yondaime's speed, but it wouldn't last as his Sage Chakra was currently starting to fade. All they had to do was outlast him, then the fight would be over. Phasing back and forth, Madara weaved through his attacks. The younger Uchiha, not having dealt with Sage Chakra before, was not so lucky. Every glancing blow he took rattled him more than the next. It seemed as though the fight with Danzo had taken more out of him than he thought. Minato continued his onslaught, knowing that he had limited time before his Senjutsu Chakra would expire. I have to continue to fight Itachi to my full extent, otherwise, Itachi's cover will be blown, thought the Namikaze. Seeing the young boy's fatigue, he engaged him once more in taijutsu. Just as his Sage Chakra was expiring, Minato gathered his chakra for final jutsu. Kaden. Goen Rasengan. Fire release, Great Flame Spiraling Sphere. Just as he was about to strike Itachi in the chest, he made slight eye contact. Seeing his opportunity, Itachi cast his Genjutsu. Tsukuyomi. Inside Tsukuyomi. Immediately Minato's world was awash with red and black. This time, instead of on a throne, Itachi knelt before his cage. Hokage-sama, to what extent do I continue this mission? Minato looked down at the boy and smiled. Till the very end, Itachi-san, for we are shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. Everything we do is for the betterment of the leaf. That is why you must be the one to end my life. Itachi looked up at his Hokage, shock evident on his face. To kill one's cage was the ultimate treason. There would be no return for him. Hokage-sama, I implore you to find an alternative. With a firm hand on his shoulder he looked him in the eye and said, "There is no alternative, that was my last technique. If you save me now, then the village will face an even greater threat in the future if Madara's plans succeed. I need you to find out what he is planning and report it back to the Sandaime. Do you understand?" Itachi took a moment to absorb everything his Hokage just told him. The ultimate sacrifice, to save the village, and preserve this peace so that future generations would no longer have to suffer as they undoubtedly would. "I understand, Hokage-sama." Outside Tsukuyomi, Minato slumped to the ground, his body spent. He looked up at Itachi with sadness in his eyes as he asked, "Why?" Itachi's face remained emotionless, as he plunged his blade into his Hokage's chest. "For power," he replied. It was just loud enough for Madara to hear, his smirk hidden behind his mask, not noticing the single tear that fell from Itachi's eyes as he turned away. At that very moment it seemed as though all of Konoha had arrived. Just in time to witness the greatest treason of their generation. Standing before them was a man wearing an orange, spiral mask and black robes. Next to him was their pride and joy, Uchiha Itachi, and he had his blade plunged into their Yondaime's heart. Many of them could not comprehend. Others fell to the ground, tears welling up in their eyes as they watched Itachi pull the blade from his chest. Once he had gotten his fill of satisfaction, Madara turned to the crowd. "Your Hokage lies dead at my feet, and your prodigy has abandoned you. There is no hope for peace in this world of realities. You shall burn in the fires of war, before you realize, there is no escape in this false reality." Having said what he needed, Madara placed a hand on Itachi's shoulder, pulling him into his pocket dimension, disappearing from sight. All at once the Konoha shinobi rushed towards their downed cage. The first to arrive was Tsunade as she attempted to stem the blood flow and seal the wound. It was too late. She clenched her hands as she realized she couldn't save another. Minato looked up at Tsunade, just as she closed her eyes and tears began to stream down her face. Weakly he spoke, "Tsunade. Please, take CC care of the village for me. I nominate you as my successor." She put on a brave face for Minato. "I will do my best, Minato." Upon hearing those words, Minato flashed away using his Hiraishin one last time, leaving the heartbroken group of shinobi. Hokage Mansion. Naruto lay restless in bed. Normally Naruto was a heavy sleeper, there wasn't much that could wake him. He loved to sleep, there was nothing better. Well, except ramen, and the color orange and his Oji-san. Still, for some strange reason he couldn't sleep tonight. He felt as if something bad was going to happen, he just didn't know what it was. Call it family intuition. Realizing he wasn't getting anywhere close sleep, Naruto decided to do what his Oji-san always told him to do when he couldn't sleep, drink a warm glass of milk. That's where Naruto was headed when he heard a noise downstairs. Remembering his shinobi training from his uncle, he began to quietly step forward towards the sound of the noise with a kunai in hand. It seemed to be coming from the living room. There was a figure sitting on the couch. Naruto couldn't make out his figure in the dark, but he could tell he had spiky hair. Getting curious, he decided to get closer to take a look. As he approached, the light of the moon shone on the intruder's face. It was his Oji-san, but something was wrong. He looked pale, and there was blood on his chest. He tentatively walked forward. "Oji-san, what's wrong?" At the sound of his voice, Minato seemed to stir. He was on death's door, but he would not dare leave without saying goodbye to his son, and so he held on for Naruto's sake. "See, come here, Naruto, I don't have much tea time," he said quietly. Walking forward, he saw it. The chest wound. His throat tightened. "No, it can't be. Not Oji-san. Oji-san, no," he shouted, rushing towards his uncle's side, tears streaming down his face. "YUT told me YUW were the strongest. Don't leave me all alone." He hugged tighter and tighter, hoping that the harder he held on, the more likely he was to stay. The look of anguish in his son's face hurt Minato more than the wound in his chest, but he needed to know, he needed to tell him. Tears streaming down his face, Minato spoke. "Naruto, look at me." Looking up, tears staining his whiskered cheeks. "Why, you grew up so fast, Naruto-kun. My only regret is that I wish I had more time to spend with my son. Your mom would be so proud of you. You're going to grow up to be a strong ninja. One that will change this world." What do you mean?" asked Naruto. Minato slowly lifted the picture frame he held in his hands and slowly handed it to Naruto. I love you, Naruto-kun. It was a picture of a smiling Minato and Kushina, their hands placed over Kushina's belly. Minato held her close, lovingly. Seeing this picture broke Naruto's heart. He had a dad. He was living with him this whole time. He looked down as tears freely flowed from his eyes. "Why2-san, why did you hide it from me?" he yelled. Looking up as he yelled, he realized his father was gone. "Tou-san, Konohagakure no Sato has always been a village of resiliency. Built upon the backs of shinobi who were said to be gods in their own right. Konoha has learned to endure when faced with the loss of their leader. Though enduring does not always mean that they did not suffer, feel pain or anguish, at the loss of their beloved Hokage. In the aftermath of Itachi's betrayal, it seemed to outsiders that Konoha was at its weakest since the Kyuubi attack. With the loss of about 75% of the Uchiha clan fighting force, their sulfur monosulfide rank Hokage, Shimura Danzo, and one of their prodigies Uchiha Shisui, things were looking dire. Kumo was sending scouting parties to probe their defenses, and it seemed there was an increase in border presence between Kumo and the Land of Hot Springs, already having an allegiance in place with the Land of Frost. With all of these issues also came the custody of one Uzumaki Naruto. During the emergency council meeting that followed the death of Minato, the elders believed it was time to begin training the boy as an ultimate weapon to use in case Kumo decided to attack. It was common knowledge that they already had one Jinchuriki with perfect control over his Biju, and they could never willingly go to war against a nation with such a powerful army killer. This idea was quickly put to rest by the Godem, Senju Tsunade, who had become overly fond of the boy as she spent most of her time away from the hospital watching over him, when she pulled out Minato's last will and testament. Normally, this would be handled by the deceased's family. Seeing as he had no family left, it was left to the council to see his final wishes done. The first was the custody of Naruto being granted to Tsunade, with her being named godmother and Jiraiya being named godfather. There was little outcry to this arrangement, seeing as most believed their Jinchuriki should be nearest their most powerful ninja at all times. The second was the boy's true heritage. This came with blood samples from both Minato and Naruto for Tsunade and the medic nins to confirm, along with instructions for Jiraiya on how to remove the seal placed upon Naruto's neck. When this particular piece of news was dropped, there was first silence, then confusion and anger. Some of the civilian council members believed that the boy had somehow influenced the Yondaime through the demon to claim him as his son. That it was all a trick to get them to believe that Naruto was the son and heir of the Namikaze fortune. This, however, was put to rest as Tsunade immediately sent for the blood provided to be tested. When the results came back, it was a near-perfect match, 99.99%. There could be no doubt. With this information, there was a greater push for the boy to be weaponized by the elders. But without Danzo, the argument held little substance, as there currently was no one with the ability to train the boy to such a motionless degree aside from Hiruzen. This information was kept at sulfur monosulfide rank and required seals to be placed upon every single council member present, including the Anbu guards. Similar to Danzo's root seal, this seal prohibited the council members to speak about Naruto's heritage. By adding the seal to the back of every council member's neck, the seal integrated itself with their cerebral cortex, causing a temporary package loss when the synapses in the brain communicated the action of speaking about the boy's heritage. This seal was placed by Jiraiya, who had raced back home to find his beloved pupil dead and ashamed at the fact that he never knew he had a godson. The third was the transfer of all assets to his son, effective once he achieved the rank of Chunin. Again, no one could dispute Minato's wishes, as Naruto's inheritance was protected by law. In a second scroll sealed within Minato's will, were the details regarding Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi's missions. This was protected with a blood seal coded to Tsunade's blood and would burn up about 5 minutes after the original seal was broken through counterintelligence measures. It was Hokage eyes only. With this new information, Tsunade made the push to have Uchiha Sasuke remanded into her custody after the extreme psychological attack by his older brother. Citing that she was the only medic capable of healing the extensive damage of having seen his family butchered before his eyes. This trauma was further extended when he returned home to find his mother with a dagger through the heart, sending the boy into a catatonic state once again. The final nail in the coffin, everyone in the room held a great pity for the boy, having endured more than any boy his age should ever have to witness. Days later, once the commotion throughout the village quieted down, they began to mourn. Minato's funeral service had lasted for 3 days. On the first day the village came together for the viewing of their hero. Wrapped in his signature, yondaine, cloak embalsamed with fire, he was set on a red velvet silk bed with his white and red cage hat placed just above his head, the kanji for fire prominently displayed for everyone to see. There were similar viewing platforms around him which included the bodies of Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Shisui. The rest of the Uchiha bodies were receiving private ceremony within the clan compound. On the second day the funeral procession began leading from the Hokage Tower and ending in Sector 3 where the funeral service was being held within the temple located near the cemetery. Upon entering the temple there were 3 funeral pyres placed, the largest of which was draped with white sheets, the kanji for yondaime, while the other 2 were draped with the words for fire along all 4 sides. Once the bodies were placed upon the pyres the service was held by the sandaime with shinobi forming ranks around the pyre. Finishing the service the shinobi and nobles present within the temple began to drop white flowers into the pyres before saying their final goodbyes. Stepping forward 2 Uchiha clan members took their places in front of the pyres of their fallen brothers. As Hiruzen stepped forward to stand in front of Minato's pyre, he stopped when he sensed someone else moving towards the pyre. Looking to his left he noticed young Uzumaki Naruto standing in front of his father's pyre with a lit funeral torch in his hands. Tears streaming down his face, a determined look in his eyes as he took his place alongside the Uchiha clan members. In this moment no one spoke, everyone stunned by the boy's actions. Murmurs could be heard going throughout the civilians, they were outraged that the boy would be doing the funeral rites. Only family can do so? What was the sandaime thinking allowing the demon this honor? These were some of the whispers being spread throughout the restless crowd. All of this went unnoticed by the young boy. He only had eyes for his now deceased father. He was sworn to secrecy to never tell anyone who his father was, but that didn't matter to him. He didn't need anyone else to know who his father was, he held his father everywhere he went within his heart. Looking back towards Kakashi who had been consoling him moments ago he gave him a thumbs up which Kakashi towards the Uchiha they shared a look, a silent understanding acknowledged all 3 turned towards the pyre. The Uchiha went first finishing their hand seals for a Kaiden jutsu of a respectable size and lit the pyres in a blaze of glory. Kaiden Gokakyu no Jutsu. Turning towards the young Uzumaki they waited for him to begin walking to the pyre to drop the torch and end the ceremony but were shocked when he dropped his torch and began a set of familiar hand seals finishing on the traditional tiger hand seal. Quickly jumping back they made it out of range before the boy shouted, "Kaiden! Karyu Enden!" Naruto produced a long stream of fire twice the size of the original Kaiden jutsus used by the Uchiha, instantly lighting the pyre. Upon finishing shocked looks could be seen throughout the shinobi ranks. A boy of 7 had just used a B-rank technique. Hiruzen sharply looked over to Kakashi only to see his signature eye smile. Finishing the technique, Naruto watched as the smoke rose from the lit pyre. "Goodbye to-san." A faint smile could be seen on the boy's lips as he fell forward allowing the darkness of his subconscious mind take over. 1 week later, sitting in her new office Tsunade sat intently staring at the picture of the Yondaime Hokage which was now framed and placed on the wall to the right of the desk. She had just finished the paperwork that legally signed Naruto and Sasuke into her custody. Tsunade never intended to have kids after Dan's death, it was never a thought that crossed her mind. Ever since she returned to the village she couldn't help but regret the decision. Especially since she thought she wasn't going to get the chance to experience her child going to school for the first time, or having to deal with the first dates and romances. Now though it seemed as though fate had intervened once again in the form of Naruto and Sasuke. She had loved Naruto from the moment he told her of his dream. He was so much like Nawaki and Dan it hurt to even look at him sometimes. She saw herself as more of a grandmother to the boy. He could have easily been mistaken as Nawaki's son for all his enthusiasm the young boy held within him. With his strength of conviction he might have even been though of as Dan's son if they had the chance to ever have children. As for Sasuke, well she didn't really know the boy. She only ever heard stories from Naruto. He seemed like a kind boy always seemingly in the shadow of his brother, but now? She wouldn't be sure what kind of boy he would be after so much trauma. He had only just woken up from whatever genjutsu Itachi cast upon him, only to find his mother dead on the floor of his family home. The scars the poor boy suffered would never be erased, but maybe she could help make it easier to deal with the memories by speaking with Inoichi. There could be blocks possibly placed upon the boy in order to keep any nightmares at bay. With a sigh, Tsunade stood, gathered all her paperwork and began to move towards the door. Of course, there was also the matter of her grandniece, Ino. She was the reason she even returned to this village. Hearing she had one last family member in Ino's mother and her grandniece made her very protective. She immediately rushed home at the news. She would not allow more of her family to leave her. The girl was a natural at medical and mental theory. Of course, it took a bit of time before she got serious about her training. Tsunade had to beat the fangirl out of her by putting on a display of what a true kunoichi could do. After that, it was easy. Once her chakra control reached the appropriate level, they would begin rudimentary medical training. Ino, Naruto and Sasuke. It seems like I have myself a cute little genin team in the making, thought the busty cage as she closed the door behind her. It's been a while since this village saw a team on par with the legendary Sannin. It was about time the next generation stepped up to the call. The last of the Uzumaki clan, the last of the Senju clan, and an Uchiha. It seems this village's future is bright. 1 year later. You're not gonna wear that to the first day of the academy, are you? Asked the 8-year-old platinum blonde girl. She was currently sitting on a bed wearing a purple dress with a yellow obi tied around her waist. The Yamanaka clan symbol present on both of her shoulders. Looking over at the blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy in front of her, she continued. You stand out like a sore thumb. Who the heck wears orange? What do you mean? Orange is the greatest color in the world, replied the Uzumaki. He was currently dressed in an orange jumpsuit with blue lining the shoulder area and the bottom of the jacket. His pants finished his ensemble, making him resemble something similar to an orange highlighter. On his face, he had taken to imitating his Ni-san by wearing a black mask and a pair of goggles resting on his forehead. Orange isn't a color a ninja should be wearing, continued the Yamanaka. You have to blend in with your surroundings. Be subtle, right, Sasuke-kun? At that moment, a Sasuke, who had been passing by, stopped and looked over at Naruto. You look like a traffic cone doby. At least target practice with Tsunade-sama will be easier now. Finishing, he continued on his way towards the kitchen, missing the withering glare sent his way by Naruto. Sasuke was dressed in his typical high-collared black shirt with a pair of white shorts. Ino had tried to stifle a laugh and failed miserably at it. Huffing angrily, he began. Well, you're wearing purple. What are you trying to blend in with, huh? Viola. Flowers? Amused, she began. They're pronounced violets, Naru Baka. Besides, purple is the color of royalty, and after all, I am a princess, she said with a wink. Orange is the color of gut feelings, and right now my gut is feeling really sick. Picking up a pair of pants and running her hands over them, she continued. Where did you find these clothes anyway? They look like they came out of the trash. Quickly looking away as a blush adorned his face. They are. A shocked look came across the girl's face, not understanding why her aunt let him wear clothes out of the trash. Why didn't Tsunade Obasan help you? Well, Ba-chan said I could pick out whatever clothes I wanted, but even with her being the Hokage, the villagers still won't sell me anything. They just kicked me out of their stores, he grumbled. Quickly getting up from the bed, she made her way to the desk in the corner of his room and pulled out a pair of scissors. A gleam in her eyes as she made her way over to Naruto. Well then, I'll just have to give you a makeover then. When they stepped out of Naruto's room, it was like he was a new kid. Stubbornly sticking to at least some orange, Ino let Naruto keep his jacket, with of course, some major adjustments. First, she began by cutting off the high-collared portion of Naruto's jacket, working her way down to the sleeves, taking those off as well. Underneath, he now wore a tight-fitting blue t-shirt with a mesh shirt underneath as opposed to his usual black and red Uzumaki clan shirt, leaving his jacket open, exposing his lean, healthy body. His pants were gone, replaced instead by blue shorts similar to Sasuke's. His feet were covered by a pair of blue, open-toed sandals, and he wore orange socks with a red Uzumaki swirl emblazoned on the front. The final piece was on his face. A blue mask covered his whisker marks and mouth. He had his goggles placed on around his neck now instead of his head, two blonde bangs framing his face as it was no longer being held up by the goggles. He could barely contain his excitement as he looked into the mirror. "I look awesome, Datbayo." An amused Ino looked on as he jumped around looking himself in the mirror. Sasuke just grunted his approval, making his way to the door. "Thank you, Ino-chan, I love it. I promise I will never call you Ino Pig again." An eerie silence permeated the room as Naruto slowly realized what he had just said. Now some people would say that Naruto was stupid, but that wasn't the case. He's just easily excitable and sometimes very dense. Very, very dense. This was one of those times. Turning, he slowly made eye contact with Sasuke. An unspoken understanding passed between them as they booked it out of the house. Behind Ino appeared a purple Hanya mask. Naruto. Shinobi Academy. Arriving at the doors of the academy, the three newly minted shinobi students stepped forward to walk through the doors. Two of them walked a bit more gingerly than one might expect from new recruits. Both Naruto and Sasuke were scuffed up and dirty with what looked like scratches from a wild feline of some sort on their cheeks. Apparently Sasuke took punishment by association, as Ino put it. "It's true what Shikamaru says, women are troublesome," thought the young Uchiha as they walked towards their classroom. Upon entering they saw familiar faces. It seemed like all their friends had graduated into the Shinobi Academy. In one row sat Nara Shikamaru and Akamichi Choji, the former sleeping with his head on the desk and the latter munching on a bag of salted chips. In another row in front sat Haruno Sakura, her pink hair standing out strongly, and Aburame Shino. His thick coat and dark sunglasses made him identifiable from blocks away. Both were usually very quiet, seemed to be in earnest conversation about something logical. In the adjacent row sat Inuzuka Kiba, his cheeks adorned with the typical red markings of the Inuzuka clan, and Hyuga Hinata, her pale white eyes standing out among the sea of black and blue. Throughout the classroom were other civilian children who seemed to have passed the exam into the academy. Having seen their friends, they quickly made their way over, taking the only available seats left. As he walked past, Naruto noticed there were a lot of glares sent his way. It seemed the parents didn't fail to mention who their kids shouldn't be playing with. It made him sad, but more determined all the same. He would earn their acknowledgement, and prove to them that he wasn't a demon. He kept up his fake smile though, if anything for his friends. He did not want to burden them with his problems, they had plenty of things to worry about. Only Sasuke seemed to notice whenever he put on a fake smile. They shared the same pain after all. The pain of having everything you loved in your life taken away. It was because of this reason that they were able to become friends. Bonding over their pain while living together with Tsunade, and having promised each other to take revenge on the man who had left them both with almost nothing. Uchiha Itachi. That name was taboo in their household, and usually led to a brooding duo that would make My Chemical Romance seem normal. The difference between the boys was how they handled their pain publicly. Neither boy burdened others with their problems. However, Naruto chose to become extroverted, putting on his fake smiles and making everything seem alright. He was the bright light that made everyone feel comfortable, like they belonged together. While Sasuke became more introverted, he would become highly agitated by the actions of his friends and those that took pity on his situation. He hated the pity most of all because it came from people who he believed could never understand what it was like to lose everything. Sasuke was the shadow that kept everyone anchored to reality. Whenever they looked at Sasuke, the cold, hard truth of the shinobi world seemed to smack them in the face like a splash of chilled water. This was the show they displayed for their friends, and they were none the wiser. Once they arrived at their seats, there was a puff of smoke at the front of the room as a number of various teachers had arrived via Shunshin. At the head of the all stood the Sandaime Hokage who, in essence, was the principal of the academy after Minato's reform. Everyone quieted down as he began to speak. "Welcome, to the first day of the rest of your lives, my young shinobi. Today marks the day you officially begin your ninja studies. I urge you all to maximize your efforts, and ensure that the will of fire continues to burn strong, for it is within each and every one of you here that the will of fire burns. It cannot be destroyed, only transferred on to the new generation." Pausing to take a look at his new charges, he cleared his throat and continued. "Now many of you may be confused as to why there are so many instructors present for your first class." A murmur of agreement passed throughout the room. These instructors will at some point in time be your instructors in the various shinobi arts. Here at the academy we have a strict structure that we will stick to in order to produce the best shinobi possible. Take a look around this room and realize this. Only about half of you will make it to graduation, and out of that half maybe a third of you will move on to make it onto the registered team of 3 under a Junin instructor. Everyone else will either be remanded to the academy, or sent to specialized divisions such as the Medic Corps or the Research and Development Department. Quote, at this revelation, everyone in the room seemed to get a bit more nervous. No one had mentioned anything about the pass-fail rate back at the civilian academy. Unease spread throughout the ranks of students, but it was quickly put to rest when one loudmouth began to shout. I don't care what you say, Gigi, I'm gonna get on one of those teams and I'm gonna the rookie of the year for this class, Datbayo. Everyone turned to look at Naruto, who was standing with his arms crossed while he shot the Sandame a defiant glare. Hiruzen could only chuckle. It seems like you're going to make things a lot more interesting, Naruto-kun. Please take a seat while I finish explaining what you all will be doing. With an ear-splitting grin, he began to scratch the back of his head as he sat down as he caught a couple of glares from some of the clanless shinobi and some smiles from his friends. Continuing with his speech, Hiruzen began once again. Now during your 4 years here your curriculum will be split into several different parts. During your first year you will focus on battle tactics used during the previous wars as well as familiarizing yourself with the more famous battles. You will also be focusing mainly on the academy level taijutsu, body techniques, katas along with working on your bukajutsu, weapons techniques, and the basic forms of chakra control. Your instructors for this year will be Amino Iruka, Toji Mizuki, and Higurashi Muramasa. During your second year we will introduce ninjutsu, ninja techniques, and genjutsu, illusionary techniques, training as well as identifying everyone's elemental affinities. During the second half of the year you will have the choice to choose ninjutsu or genjutsu specific classes. Your instructors for this year will include myself and Kurama Yakumo. During your third and fourth years we will be including the ability to choose 2 electives from a list. The 2 that you pick will be included with your nen, general jutsus as your specializations for when you graduate. The list you will choose from is the following. Genjutsu, for those who chose ninjutsu in year 2, taught by Kurama Yakumo. Ninjutsu, for those who chose genjutsu in year 2, taught by myself. Iryo ninjutsu, medical ninja techniques, taught by Kato Shizune. Fuinjutsu, sealing techniques, taught by Uzumaki Hinoka. Advanced bukajutsu, this includes kenjutsu, sword techniques, and bojutsu, staff techniques, taught by Higurashi Masamura. During this time Hiruzen spoke slowly, each teacher stepping forward as their name was called, introducing themselves. Hiruzen was pleased to see everyone was taking notes, including Naruto, who did not seem to find this information to be boring. It seems he's taking this seriously, Sarutobi thought. I can only hope Minato's will of fire passed on to his son. If it did, I can expect great things out of you, Naruto-kun. With this new year, there could only be improvement on what would be an impressive graduating class, 8 clan heirs. Hiruzen could not ask for a better crop of students.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.